Welcome to the Tired Thinker, where contemplation slows down and deep thoughts take their time. Tonight, we're diving into something ancient, unseen, and endlessly patient: gravity. It's the reason we stay grounded. The moon tugs at the tides, and stars dance in the dark. We barely notice it, yet it's the force behind everything, from galaxies and planets to your breath, your bones, and the arc of your quiet reflections. Before we drift into this mysterious force, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it in your corner of the world? It's strange, isn't it? A video about gravity, and here we are scattered across the globe, all gently held in place, together. If you find this slow, thoughtful exploration comforting, or if you're just looking to rest your mind after a long day, I'd truly appreciate it if you gave this video a like or subscribed. It helps this humble little channel reach others who may need a soft moment of curiosity too. Now, let's begin. You stand in front of two doors. One door leads to freedom, the other to death. Before you are two guards. One always tells the truth, and the other always lies. You are allowed to ask just one question, and you can ask it to either guard. What question will you ask to find the door to freedom? At first glance, this problem seems tricky. After all, you don't know which guard is which. You're standing in front of two guards, both of whom could give you the wrong answer. The situation may feel like you're stuck, but there's a simple solution if you think about it carefully. Let's break this down. You have two guards, one who tells the truth and one who lies. If you ask either guard directly which door leads to freedom, you can't trust the answer because of the possibility of encountering the liar. If you ask the truth teller, they'll tell you the right door, but if you ask the liar, they'll point to the wrong door. So, how can you find the right door with just one question? The key lies in the fact that you can ask a question that involves the other guard's answer, and that will lead you to the truth, no matter whom you ask. Here's the question you should ask. If I were to ask the other guard which door leads to freedom, what would they say? Let's explore why this works. When you ask this question, you are essentially asking each guard to predict what the other guard would say. Let's imagine asking the truth teller. The truth teller knows that the other guard is the liar. So they know that the liar would point to the wrong door. Because the truth teller is being honest, they will truthfully tell you that the liar would point to the wrong door. So, the truth teller tells you the wrong door because they are accurately reporting what the liar would say. Now let's think about asking the liar. The liar knows that the other guard is the truth teller, and the truth teller would point to the correct door. But because the liar always lies, they will tell you the opposite of what the truth teller would say. So the liar would also point to the wrong door, because they're lying about what the truth teller would say. In both cases, the guard you ask will tell you the wrong door. So, once you've received the answer, you should choose the opposite door. Let's walk through a specific example. Suppose the left door leads to freedom, and the right door leads to death. The truth teller knows this, and the liar knows this too. If you ask the truth teller what the liar would say, the truth teller will honestly tell you that the liar would point to the right door. The liar, however, knows the truth teller would point to the left door, but will lie and point to the right door instead. In either case, you are told that the right door leads to freedom. So, the opposite is true. The left door is the one that leads to freedom. Now you might wonder if it matters which guard you ask. The beauty of this puzzle is that it doesn't matter. Whether you ask the truth teller or the liar, the answer will always be the same. Both will point to the wrong door, and so you can confidently choose the opposite one. This question works because it forces both guards to reveal the wrong door, no matter what. The liar can't give you the truth, and the truth teller can only tell you the truth. When you ask them about the other guard's answer, it removes the ambiguity. Each guard is, in effect, trapped by the structure of the question. Now let's think about why this question works so well in more detail. It's not just about asking the guards for their opinion or their knowledge about the doors. It's about asking them to think about what the other would say, This makes the question more powerful than simply asking one guard which door leads to freedom. When you ask the question that involves both guards, you're forcing them into a situation where they can't avoid giving you useful information. This puzzle highlights the power of indirect reasoning. You aren't just asking for direct facts, you're setting up a situation where both guards are forced to give you an answer that can be used to deduce the truth. It's a perfect example of how sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't to ask directly, but to ask in a way that forces the person or thing you're questioning to reveal the information you need in an indirect way. To summarize, when faced with two guards, one who tells the truth and one who lies, and two doors, one leading to freedom and the other to death, the question you should ask either guard is, if I were to ask the other guard which door leads to freedom, what would they say? This question works because it forces both guards to reveal the wrong door, allowing you to choose the opposite one and find the path to freedom. By thinking indirectly, you avoid the problem of being misled by the liar and can use the truth-teller's answer to your advantage. This puzzle is a good example of how logical thinking can help us navigate even seemingly impossible situations. Instead of focusing on direct facts or trying to figure out who is telling the truth and who is lying, we can focus on the structure of the question itself. When we understand how to use indirect reasoning, we can turn even the most difficult challenges into solvable puzzles. You're standing in front of 3 light switches, each connected to one of 3 bulbs in a separate room. The twist is that you can only enter the room with the bulbs once. You need to figure out which switch controls which bulb, but you can't go back and forth between the switches and the bulbs to test your guesses. The solution requires a careful combination of observation and understanding the properties of the bulbs and how they react to being turned on. At first, this may seem like a straightforward task. After all, you have 3 switches and 3 bulbs. You might think that you could simply turn on one switch, go into the room, and see which bulb is on. Then you could repeat the process with the other switches. But there's a catch. You can only enter the bulb room once. This means you'll have to figure out a way to gather the necessary information without stepping into the room multiple times. The key to solving this problem lies in the properties of the light bulbs themselves. A light bulb, when switched on, gives off more than just light. It also produces heat. This is the crucial piece of the puzzle. Heat can provide you with an additional clue, and if we use it correctly, you can determine which bulb is connected to which switch without ever needing to go back to the room again. To begin, you need to use the first switch. Turn it on and leave it on for a few minutes. The reason you leave it on for a few minutes is that the bulb connected to this switch will start to heat up over time. Bulbs typically heat up fairly quickly once they've been on for a while. The longer they stay on, the warmer they become. This gives you a clear way to distinguish between bulbs based on how long they've been exposed to heat. While the first switch is on, go ahead and flip on the second switch. Leave the first one on for several minutes while the second switch is only just turned on. After waiting for a short while, turn off the first switch and immediately go into the room with the bulbs. Now you're in the room, and you need to identify which bulb is connected to which switch. You'll use both the light and the heat to figure this out. When you enter the room, you'll notice that one bulb is on and lit. This is the bulb that's connected to the second switch, the one that you turned on right before entering the room. It's the only bulb that's actively glowing at the moment. Now, check the 2 remaining bulbs. One of these will feel warm to the touch. The warmth indicates that this bulb was on for a while, and like the second bulb, was connected to a switch. Since the first switch was left on for several minutes before being turned off, the bulb connected to it has had enough time to heat up. This bulb will be warm to the touch, giving you the information you need. The final bulb, which will be neither lit nor warm, is the bulb controlled by the third switch, the one you never turned on. Here's a breakdown of what you've learned. The bulb that is lit is connected to the second switch, the one you turned on last. The bulb that is warm but not lit is connected to the first switch, which was on for a while but is now off. The bulb that is neither lit nor warm is connected to the third switch, which you never turned on. By combining the clues of light, which bulb is currently on, and temperature, which bulb is warm, you've successfully determined which switch controls each bulb. To help clarify the process, let's look at an example. Imagine that switch 1 controls bulb A, switch 2 controls bulb B, and switch 3 controls bulb C. Here's how the steps would unfold. Step 1. You flip switch 1 on and leave it on for several minutes. Bulb A will warm up during this time. Step 2. After waiting a few minutes, you turn switch 1 off and turn switch 2 on. Bulb B will now be on, but bulb A will still be warm. Step 3. You then enter the room with the bulbs. Bulb B is lit, so you know it is controlled by switch 2. Step 4. You check the temperature of the other two bulbs. Bulb A is warm to the touch, so it must be connected to switch 1. Step 5. The last bulb, bulb C, is neither on nor warm, so it must be connected to switch 3, the one you never turned on. In just one visit to the bulb room, you've matched each switch to its corresponding bulb. The key here is using more than just the fact that a bulb is on or off. Heat, in this case, becomes an important clue that allows you to solve the puzzle efficiently. This puzzle demonstrates the power of thinking beyond the obvious. Most people would immediately think of turning switches on and off, but by using heat, you've expanded the possible clues you can use. It's also an example of how sometimes the solution isn't about what's immediately in front of you, but about understanding the underlying properties of the situation. You didn't need to guess or try repeatedly to figure out which switch controls which bulb. By observing both the state of the bulbs and their temperatures, you used a combination of clues to logically deduce the correct answers. This approach is both efficient and clever, making use of all the available information without wasting time or effort. This type of thinking can be applied to other puzzles and problems as well. Often we get stuck thinking about problems in one way, focusing only on the most obvious aspects of the situation. But when we look for more subtle clues, in this case, heat, we open up new ways of thinking that help us solve the problem with ease. It's a reminder that sometimes the solution to a problem lies in understanding the full range of possibilities and using all the tools at your disposal. And while this puzzle might seem small and simple, it encourages a mindset of strategic thinking. In real-world situations, we often face challenges where we're only allowed one shot at solving the problem. Whether it's in science, engineering, or even everyday life, the ability to think creatively and use the resources you have wisely can make all the difference in finding a solution. This approach, using heat and light to solve the puzzle, is a reminder that even the most straightforward challenges often have a solution that requires more than just basic observation. By thinking about the problem from different angles, you can uncover insights that lead to the right answer. You have 1,000 bottles of wine, and one of them is poisoned. The challenge is that you have only 10 lab rats and one test to figure out which bottle contains the poison. The poison takes 24 hours to show its effects, so you have to find a way to identify the poisoned bottle without wasting time or using multiple tests. At first glance, this seems like a puzzle with limited options. You can't test every single bottle individually because you only have 10 rats and one test. If you tested each bottle separately, you would need to use a rat for each test, and that would still take too long and wouldn't give you the right result. So how can you use the rats and the test most effectively? The solution lies in a clever method of testing where you combine bottles together in groups. Instead of testing each bottle one by one, you will test combinations of bottles. This way, you can narrow down the poisoned bottle by observing which rats show the effects of the poison. The key is to treat this like a binary problem, where you can use the rats to represent binary digits, ones and zeros. Here's how it works. You have 10 rats and 1,000 bottles, so you can think of the rats as being able to give you 10 binary signals, either a 1 or a 0. This gives you the ability to represent 2 to the power of 10 or 1,024 possibilities, which is enough to cover all 1,000 bottles of wine. Each rat can be either alive or dead after the test, which will correspond to a binary digit in a binary number. By organizing the testing this way, you can identify the poisoned bottle with just one round of testing. First, label the bottles from 1 to 1,000. Now you will assign a binary number to each bottle. To do this, use the binary representation of the bottle number. For example, Bottle 1 is 000001 in binary. Bottle 2 is 000010 in binary. Bottle 3 is 00000011 in binary. Bottle 4 is 00000100 in binary. Bottle 5 is 00000101 in binary, and so on. Each binary digit corresponds to one of the 10 rats. If the digit in the binary number is 1, that rat will drink from the bottle. If the digit is 0, the rat will not drink from the bottle. Let's take bottle number 3 as an example. The binary representation of 3 is 000011. This means that rats 9 and 10 will drink from bottle 3. If you test this bottle and after 24 hours, rats 9 and 10 die, then you know that bottle 3 is the poisoned bottle. The dead rats correspond to the ones in the binary number. Now let's work through the process step by step. Label the bottles. First, label all the bottles from 1 to 1,000. You need to assign each bottle a binary number from 0000001 to 1111100. This will give you a clear reference for which rats need to drink from which bottles. Assign rats to binary digits. Next, assign each of the 10 rats to a digit in the binary number. For example, rat 1 corresponds to the first digit, the most significant bit. Rat 2 corresponds to the second digit, and so on. Have the rats drink. Now for each bottle, look at its binary representation. If the digit in the binary number is 1, the corresponding rat will drink from that bottle. If the digit is 0, the rat won't drink. For example, if bottle 5 is represented as 00001001 in binary, rats 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 will drink from it. Wait 24 hours. After all the rats have drunk from their assigned bottles, you wait 24 hours. The poison takes time to show its effects, so you give the rats enough time for the poison to take hold. Observe the rats. After 24 hours, check which rats are alive and which are dead. Each rat's fate will correspond to a binary digit. If a rat is alive, the binary digit for that rat is 0. If the rat is dead, the binary digit is 1. The combination of live and dead rats will give you a binary number, and that binary number corresponds to the poison bottle. For example, let's say you have the following outcome. Rats 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are dead. Rats 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are alive. The binary number formed by this sequence is 101010110. This binary number corresponds to bottle number 682, the decimal equivalent of 101010. In this case, bottle 682 would be the poisoned bottle. This method works because it allows you to test multiple bottles at once by using the binary representation of each bottle number. Each rat represents a single binary digit, and their deaths correspond to a 1 in the binary number. By using binary numbers, you can cover all 1,000 bottles with just 10 rats. One of the most important aspects of this method is how efficiently it works. You only need one test, One round of giving the rats wine, and you can use the results of the rat's survival to figure out exactly which bottle is poisoned. You don't need to test bottles individually, which would take too much time and too many resources. Instead, you use the combination of rats and binary numbers to solve the problem in a single test. This approach also shows how powerful binary systems are in solving problems involving multiple possibilities. In this case, the 10 rats give you 2 to the power of 10, or 1,024 possible outcomes. Since there are only 1,000 bottles, you have enough possibilities to test each one. By thinking about the problem in terms of binary numbers, you transform what seems like an overwhelming task into a manageable one. To sum up the process, label the bottles from 1 to 1,000, assign each rat to a binary digit, have the rats drink from the bottles based on the binary representation of each bottle. Wait 24 hours to see which rats die. Use the combination of dead and alive rats to form a binary number. Convert that binary number to a decimal, and you have the poisoned bottle. This method is a perfect example of how you can use a simple system, like binary numbers, to solve a complex problem efficiently, with just one test and the careful observation of your rat's reactions. You can pinpoint the poisoned bottle and avoid wasting any time or resources. You are faced with a puzzle involving two people, each making a statement about the other. The first person says, "The person next to me is a liar." The second person responds, "He's lying." The question is simple: who is telling the truth? At first glance, this may appear to be a straightforward case of determining who is honest and who is not. However, this puzzle is designed to be tricky, and the solution lies in carefully considering the implications of both individuals' statements and how they interrelate. To arrive at the correct answer, you need to think about the logical consequences of the statements made by both people. The puzzle invites us to consider the self-referential nature of the statements and how the truth or falsehood of one statement impacts the other. This is a classic example of a logic puzzle that requires patience and careful reasoning. Let's begin by breaking down the puzzle step by step. Analyzing the statements. We have two individuals, person A and person B. The key statements are as follows. Person A says, "The person next to me is a liar." Person B says, "He's lying." The relationship between these statements is crucial. Each statement depends on the truth of the other, creating a loop of interdependent truths and lies. Let's explore the two possibilities, one at a time. What happens if person A is telling the truth? And what happens if person A is lying? Scenario 1. Assume person A is telling the truth. Let's start by assuming that person A is indeed telling the truth. If person A is telling the truth, their statement, "The person next to me is a liar," must also be true. This means that person B must be a liar. If person B is a liar, then their statement, "He's lying," must be false. The lie in this case is the statement, "He's lying," which is meant to suggest that person A is lying. But if person B's statement is false, then person A is not lying, which matches our original assumption that person A is telling the truth. So in this scenario, everything checks out. Person A is telling the truth, and person B is indeed the liar. The logical flow of the statements leads to a consistent conclusion, where the first person's statement is true and the second person's statement is false. Scenario 2. Assume person A is lying. Now let's consider the other possibility. What if person A is lying? If person A is lying, then their statement, "The person next to me is a liar," must be false. This would mean that person B is not a liar, but must instead be telling the truth. If person B is telling the truth, then their statement, "He's lying," must be correct. This aligns with the idea that person A is, in fact, lying. So in this scenario, person A is lying and person B is telling the truth. Comparing the two scenarios. Let's now compare both scenarios. In scenario 1, where person A is telling the truth, person B must be a liar. In scenario 2, where person A is lying, person B must be telling the truth. In both cases, person B turns out to be the truth teller. Therefore, we can conclude that person B is telling the truth and person A is the liar. Understanding the logic. Why does this work? The key to understanding this puzzle lies in recognizing that both statements are self-referential. Each statement depends on the other to determine whether it is true or false. The two statements create a loop in which one person's truth or falsehood directly affects the truth or falsehood of the other person's statement. If you assume that one person is telling the truth, the other person's statement must align with that assumption, leading to the conclusion that the first person's statement is false. If person A were telling the truth, person B would have to be lying, and their statement would be false. But if person B is lying, then person A must be telling the truth. This creates a paradox that only resolves when you assume that person B is the truth teller. This self-referential structure is what makes this puzzle both interesting and challenging. On the other hand, if person A were lying, their statement, "The person next to me is a liar," would be false, which means that person B is not a liar and must be telling the truth. When person B is telling the truth, their statement, "He's lying," accurately points to person A as the liar. Thus, the logic of the puzzle holds up when we assume that person B is the truth teller and person A is the liar. Applying logical thinking to solve the puzzle. This puzzle is an excellent exercise in logical thinking. It requires you to look beyond the individual statements and consider how they interact with each other. It's not enough to take the statements at face value. You need to analyze how one statement can influence the other. The puzzle illustrates how, when solving complex problems, it is often necessary to break down the problem into smaller, manageable parts and test out different possibilities. By following a logical path and examining all potential outcomes, you can arrive at the correct solution. The process of considering both possibilities, person A telling the truth or person A lying, allows you to see that the only consistent outcome is that person B is telling the truth. This shows how careful reasoning and critical thinking can help unravel seemingly complicated scenarios. This puzzle also teaches a valuable lesson about self-referential statements, where a statement refers to its own truth or falsehood. It's easy to overlook these types of statements because they seem simple at first, but they often require deeper analysis to uncover their true meaning. In real life, we encounter self-referential problems in various contexts, whether in mathematics, philosophy, or even in daily interactions. Understanding how to approach these problems with clear logic is an important skill that can help us solve complex issues in many areas of life. The role of patience and critical thinking. Solving this puzzle also demonstrates the value of patience and critical thinking. It might be tempting to jump to a conclusion after reading the statements, but this puzzle shows that taking the time to carefully break down the possibilities and follow the logical implications can lead to the correct solution. In life, we often face situations where quick decisions must be made, but by taking a step back and considering all angles, we can make more informed and thoughtful choices. The puzzle structure is a great reminder that the truth is often not as simple as it seems. In this case, it's not just about one person being truthful and the other lying. The relationship between the two statements creates a complex web of truth and lies, and it's only by carefully analyzing the interaction that we can determine the truth. By carefully considering the implications of the statements and examining the logical connections between them, we arrive at the conclusion that person B is the truth teller and person A is the liar. This puzzle illustrates how logic can help us navigate even the most confusing situations. 3 people are wearing hats. Each hat is either red or blue, but they cannot see their own hats. The puzzle starts with the last person in line looking at the 2 people in front of them and saying, "I don't know." Then, the second person, seeing only the first person's hat, says, "I don't know." Finally, the first person, who cannot see anyone else's hat, declares, "Red." The goal is to figure out the colors of the hats worn by the 3 people. Let's approach this step by step. We'll carefully analyze the situation and what each statement means in terms of the available information. The key here is that each person's statement builds on the knowledge gained from the previous responses. The challenge lies in deducing how each statement relates to the others. At the start of the puzzle, all three people know that the hats are either red or blue. They can see the hats of the people in front of them, but they cannot see their own hat. The last person in line can see the hats of the second and first people. The second person can see only the first person's hat, and the first person cannot see anyone's hat. When the last person says, "I don't know," it means they cannot determine the color of their own hat. This response is critical. The last person can see the hats of both the second and first people. So if both of them were wearing blue hats, they would know they must be wearing a red hat because there are only two colors. However, the last person says, "I don't know," which means at least one of the two people in front of them must be wearing a red hat. This is the first clue that helps us begin narrowing down the possibilities. Next, the second person hears the last person's response and says, "I don't know." This means the second person, who can see the first person's hat, still cannot figure out their own hat color. If the first person were wearing a blue hat, the second person would immediately know they must be wearing a red hat. Since the last person didn't know their own hat color and must have seen at least one red hat, but because the second person says, "I don't know," this indicates that the first person must be wearing a red hat. If the first person were wearing a blue hat, the second person would have been able to deduce their own hat color based on the last person's confusion. Finally, the first person, after hearing both the last person and the second person, declares red. This means the first person has figured out that they are wearing a red hat. Since the second person couldn't determine their own hat color unless they saw a red hat on the first person, the first person knows that their own hat must be red. The first person's deduction is based on the information provided by the other two people's statements. Now, let's break down what we know about the hat colors based on the reasoning process. The last person says, "I don't know," which means they see at least one red hat. The second person says, "I don't know," which means they see a red hat on the first person. The first person then says, "red," meaning they know they are wearing a red hat. Based on this, we can conclude that the first person is wearing a red hat. The second person must also be wearing a red hat because the second person's statement indicates they saw a red hat on the first person. The last person, who is unsure of their own hat color but knows that at least one person in front of them is wearing a red hat, must be wearing a blue hat. So the hat colors are as follows. The first person is wearing a red hat. The second person is wearing a red hat. The last person is wearing a blue hat. Let's verify that this solution is consistent with the puzzle's conditions. The last person, seeing both the second and first person's hats, says, "I don't know." This is correct because they see at least one red hat, so they cannot immediately determine their own hat color. The second person, who sees the first person's red hat, says, "I don't know." This is also correct because if the first person were wearing a blue hat, the second person would know they must be wearing a red hat. But since the second person still doesn't know, the first person must be wearing a red hat. The first person, hearing the other two, then deduces that they are wearing a red hat. Given the second person's confusion, the first person knows their hat must be red. Thus, this reasoning holds up, and the hat colors of each person are as follows. First person, red. Second person, red. Last person, blue. The key to solving this puzzle lies in understanding how the responses build upon each other. Each "I don't know" answer is a piece of information that, when combined with the others, leads to the conclusion. By analyzing the statements carefully and logically, we can figure out the color of each person's hat, even without directly seeing them. ... You're on an island with two kinds of people, liars and truth-tellers. Truth-tellers always tell the truth, and liars always lie. You meet one person and you want to know the way to the village. The problem is, you don't know if the person is a liar or a truth teller. You need to ask one question that guarantees a truthful answer. What do you ask? This puzzle may seem difficult at first. After all, you have no idea whether the person in front of you is lying or telling the truth. If you ask them directly, which way is the village, they could give you the wrong direction if they are a liar. So, how do you ask a question that forces a truthful answer, no matter whether the person is a liar or a truth teller? The answer lies in a specific type of question. The question you need to ask is this: if I were to ask you which way the village is, what would you say? At first glance, this question might seem odd, but it is exactly what you need. Here's why. The truth teller's response. Let's start by imagining the person you meet is a truth teller. If you ask them, if I were to ask you which way the village is, what would you say? The truth teller will give you a truthful answer. Since they always tell the truth, their answer to this question will be the same as if you had asked them directly. They will point in the correct direction. For example, if the truth teller knows the village is to the left, they will tell you the left direction. There is no need for them to lie or change their response, because the question is asking them to confirm what they would say in the first place. The truth teller simply tells the truth, and you get the right direction. The liar's response. Now, let's consider what happens if the person you meet is a liar. A liar always lies. If you were to ask them directly, which way is the village, they would point in the wrong direction. However, when you ask them, if I were to ask you which way the village is, what would you say? You are forcing them into a corner. The liar knows that if you asked them directly, they would point in the wrong direction. But when you ask them what they would say, they have to lie about their own lie. They cannot tell the truth about the direction they would normally give. So, instead of pointing in the wrong direction, the liar will lie about that and point in the correct direction. Let's break this down with a clearer example. Imagine that the village is to the left, and the liar knows that if asked directly, they would point to the right. But when you ask, if I were to ask you which way the village is, what would you say? The liar knows they must lie about their response. So, instead of pointing to the right, which they would do if asked directly, they lie about their answer and point to the left, which is the correct direction. The question works for both. What makes this question so powerful is that it works regardless of whether the person you ask is a liar or a truth teller. If you ask a truth teller, they will simply give you the correct direction. If you ask a liar, they will lie about their lie and still point you in the right direction. The structure of the question is key. When you ask, if I were to ask you which way the village is, what would you say? You are forcing both the truth teller and the liar to reveal the correct direction. The truth teller will give you the truth directly. The liar will lie about the wrong answer they would give and end up pointing to the right direction. Why this works? To understand why this question works, let's break it down logically. A truth teller always tells the truth. If you ask them what they would say, they will simply repeat the correct direction. A liar, however, always lies. If you ask them what they would say, they have to lie about their answer, which forces them to point to the correct direction. This question creates a situation where the liar's behavior works against them. Normally, a liar would mislead you by pointing to the wrong direction, but by asking them what they would say, you ensure they will lie about their lie and give you the correct direction instead. An example to clarify. Imagine you are standing on an island with two paths. One path leads to safety, and the other leads to danger. You meet a person and want to know which path leads to safety. You don't know if the person is a liar or a truth teller. If the person is a truth teller, they will tell you the correct path. If the village is to the left, they will tell you the village is to the left. If the person is a liar, they will point to the wrong path if asked directly. But if you ask them, if I were to ask you which path leads to safety, what would you say? The liar will lie about the wrong answer they would give. They will point to the correct path because they must lie about what they would say. So, in both cases, the answer you receive will be the correct path. Another example. Now imagine you are lost and want to know which way to go. You are on an island and you meet one person. This person could either be a truth teller or a liar. If you ask them directly, which way to the village, they might give you the wrong direction if they are a liar. But if you ask them, if I were to ask you which way to the village, what would you say? Then no matter what, they will give you the right direction. If they are a truth teller, they will just tell you the truth. If they are a liar, they will lie about what they would normally say and give you the correct answer anyway. By asking this simple question, you can always get the right answer. Whether the person is a truth teller or a liar, the structure of the question forces them to reveal the truth. This approach works because it takes advantage of how liars behave. They always lie, but when forced to lie about what they would say, they end up giving the correct information. This clever use of logic ensures that you can find the right direction no matter what. Imagine you're in a dark room, and in front of you is a drawer with 30 socks, 10 red, 10 blue, and 10 green. You can't see the socks, and all you have to go on is the feel of the fabric. Your goal is simple. You want to pull out enough socks to guarantee you have at least one matching pair. The question is, how many socks do you need to take out to ensure you have a matching pair? At first glance, it might seem like you can just take out 2 socks and hope they match, but this would not guarantee a matching pair. This is because you might pull out 1 red sock and 1 blue sock. They wouldn't match, and you'd have to keep going. To think through this logically, it's helpful to consider the worst-case scenario. In the worst-case situation, you want to plan for the possibility that you end up with as many socks as possible without having a matching pair. If you pull out 1 red sock, 1 blue sock, and 1 green sock, you still don't have a matching pair. Each of the 3 socks is a different color. Now you've taken 3 socks out of the drawer and none of them match. The next sock you pull out, whether it's red, blue, or green, will match one of the socks you already have. It could match the red sock, the blue sock, or the green sock, but it will definitely create a matching pair. This is because there are only 3 colors of socks in the drawer. So in the worst-case scenario, you will have 3 socks of different colors after pulling out the first 3. When you pull out the 4th sock, it must match one of the first 3 you've taken. Therefore, you need to pull out at least 4 socks to guarantee that you have at least one matching pair. Let's walk through it again, step by step. You take out 1 sock. It could be red, blue, or green. You take out a 2nd sock. It could be a different color than the first one. You take out a 3rd sock. This one could be a different color than the first 2. You take out a 4th sock. No matter what color it is, it will match one of the 3 socks you've already taken out. So, to guarantee a matching pair, you need to take out 4 socks. This works because there are only 3 possible colors, and by the time you pull out the 4th sock, it will have to match one of the socks you've already pulled out. This approach applies to any situation where you're trying to guarantee that you have a pair of something. If you have more than 2 options, like the 3 colors in this case, the worst-case scenario is that you pull out 1 of each color first. After that, it's certain that your next sock will match one of the socks you've already taken. Now, think about it from another angle. What if you only had 2 colors of socks? For example, let's say the drawer had 10 red socks and 10 blue socks, but no green socks. If you pull out 1 red sock, then a 2nd red sock, you've already got a matching pair. But if you pull out 1 red sock and 1 blue sock, you still don't have a matching pair. In this case, the worst-case scenario would be that you pull out 1 red sock and 1 blue sock first. But as soon as you pull out a 3rd sock, it's guaranteed to match either the red or the blue sock. Again, this would mean you need to take out at least 3 socks to ensure a matching pair. These scenarios show that the number of socks you need to pull out depends on the number of colors available. In the original case, there were 3 colors, so you needed to pull out 4 socks. If there were only 2 colors, you would need to pull out 3 socks. What if you had even more colors? For example, let's say you have 10 red socks, 10 blue socks, 10 green socks, and 10 yellow socks. If you pull out 1 red sock, 1 blue sock, 1 green sock, and 1 yellow sock, you still won't have a matching pair. But when you pull out the 5th sock, it will have to match one of the 4 socks you've already taken out. In general, if you have n colors of socks, you need to pull out at least n plus 1 socks to guarantee that you have a matching pair. This is the general rule. The number of socks you need to pull out is 1 more than the number of colors of socks in the drawer. This rule applies to any situation where you're trying to guarantee a match. It works because the worst-case scenario is that you pull out 1 sock of each color, and then the next sock you pull will match one of them. Let's break it down into an example with more than 3 colors. If you had 10 red socks, 10 blue socks, 10 green socks, 10 yellow socks, and 10 purple socks, you would need to pull out at least 6 socks to guarantee a matching pair. In the worst case, you could pull out 1 red sock, 1 blue sock, 1 green sock, 1 yellow sock, and 1 purple sock. When you pull out the 6th sock, it will match one of the socks you already have. You can use this strategy to figure out the number of socks to pull out in any similar situation. Whether you're looking at socks in a drawer, marbles in a bag, or any other objects, this same logic applies. The key is to think about the worst-case scenario where you pull out 1 of each color, and then the next one will match. The number of items you need to pull out to guarantee a match is always 1 more than the number of options you have. This type of problem is called the pigeonhole principle, and it's a common concept in mathematics and logic. It's used to figure out situations where you have limited options and need to guarantee that something happens. In this case, the pigeonholes are the colors of socks, and the pigeons are the socks you're pulling out. The principle says that if you put more items into fewer categories than the number of items, at least one category will end up with more than one item. In your case, by pulling out enough socks, you ensure that at least one color has more than one sock. So, if you have 10 red, 10 blue, and 10 green socks in a dark drawer, and you want to guarantee a matching pair, you will need to pull out at least 4 socks. The logic works the same way if there are more colors of socks. Just adjust the number accordingly. The principle helps you make sure that no matter what, you can always have a matching pair after a certain number of pulls. A man says, "Brothers and sisters I have none, but the man in the photo is my father's son." This statement leads to a question. Who is in the picture? At first, it might seem like a simple question with a complex answer. It's not immediately clear who the man in the photo could be based on the initial phrasing. The man talks about his father and the son of his father, which could lead to the assumption that he's referring to someone else. But upon closer inspection, the puzzle becomes much simpler than it first appears. To figure out the answer, let's carefully break down the statement piece by piece. The man begins by saying, "Brothers and sisters I have none." This phrase is the first clue that helps us understand the rest of the statement. The fact that he has no brothers or sisters means he is an only child. This information is vital because it eliminates the possibility that the man is talking about anyone other than himself when he mentions "my father's son." Since he has no siblings, the only son of his father can only be the speaker himself. Now, let's take a closer look at the second part of the statement. The man in the photo is my father's son. At first glance, this seems like it could be referring to someone else. After all, the phrase "my father's son" could suggest that he's talking about another person, someone besides himself. But because we know that the speaker has no siblings, we can rule out the possibility that he's talking about anyone other than himself. The phrase "my father's son" is simply a roundabout way of saying me. This is where the riddle plays on language and how we interpret it. The phrase "my father's son" is a common way of referring to oneself. but it can sound a bit more complex when it's used in a riddle. The speaker is using this phrase to describe himself in relation to his father. Since he's an only child, the only person who can be my father's son is the speaker himself. The man in the photo, then, must be the speaker himself. To make this clearer, let's imagine that you are the person making the statement. You say, "Brothers and sisters I have none," which means you are the only child of your parents. Then you add, "The man in the photo is my father's son." If you have no siblings, the only son of your father is you. Therefore, when you refer to "my father's son," you're referring to yourself. So, the man in the photo is you. At this point, it might still seem a little confusing, because the phrasing makes us think that the man is referring to someone else. But when we understand the context, that the man has no siblings, the answer becomes clear. The man is talking about himself. This riddle is a good example of how careful thinking and analysis of language can lead us to the right answer, even when the wording is designed to mislead us. This puzzle works because it plays on how we typically interpret language. When we hear someone say, "my father's son," we naturally think of another person. But in this case, because the speaker is an only child, that person can only be the speaker himself. It's a clever use of words that seems to suggest one thing, but upon closer inspection, actually means something else entirely. The key to solving this riddle is realizing that the speaker has no brothers, so the only possible son of his father is the speaker himself. The man's use of the phrase, "my father's son," also highlights an interesting feature of language. We often use indirect or roundabout ways of referring to ourselves, sometimes without even thinking about it. This is a natural part of how we communicate, but in riddles like this one, it can make things seem more complicated than they really are. The riddle relies on this common way of referring to oneself to trick us into thinking the answer is more complex than it actually is. This type of riddle is quite common and relies on the same principle. Language can be used in ways that mislead us into making incorrect assumptions. The way a question or statement is phrased can make us think there's a hidden answer or a tricky solution. But in many cases, once we take the time to really think about the words and their meaning, the answer becomes much simpler. In this case, once we understand that the man has no siblings, we can see that the man in the photo must be himself. The statement, while sounding more complicated than it is, becomes straightforward once we analyze it carefully. The key is in the logical process. The man has no brothers, and therefore, "my father's son" refers to him. Many riddles like this one use a similar trick. They present a situation where the answer seems obvious at first, but the wording causes confusion. The statement, "the man in the photo is my father's son," sounds like it could refer to someone else, but the context reveals that it's actually talking about the speaker himself. In riddles like this, it's essential to break down each part of the statement and examine the meaning of the words carefully. When we first hear the statement, we might be inclined to think that the man in the photo is someone else, perhaps a brother or a relative of the speaker. But by paying attention to the fact that the speaker has no siblings, we can rule out any other possibilities. This helps us narrow down the answer to something much simpler than it first appeared. The riddle is an example of how riddles and puzzles often use language to create confusion, even when the solution is right in front of us. It challenges us to think carefully about the words being used and forces us to reconsider our assumptions. In this case, the answer is simple once we stop and consider the logic behind the statement. The man in the photo is the speaker himself. The puzzle might seem tricky at first because of the wording, but it's really just a test of how carefully we pay attention to the details. By breaking down the sentence and analyzing the facts, we can easily determine that the man in the photo is the speaker himself. A farmer has a difficult task ahead of him. He needs to transport a wolf, a goat, and a cabbage across a river, using a boat that can only carry the farmer himself and one other item at a time. The challenge here is not just getting them across, but ensuring that the wolf, goat, and cabbage are all kept safe. If the farmer isn't careful, there is a risk that either the wolf will eat the goat or the goat will eat the cabbage. It's a tricky situation, but with some careful planning, the farmer can successfully get all three items across the river without any harm coming to them. At first glance, the solution might not be immediately obvious. The first thing to consider is the fact that the boat can only carry one item besides the farmer, which limits the farmer's options. There's no way to take all three at once, so he has to make multiple trips across the river. The next thing to think about is the risk involved. The wolf, goat, and cabbage can't be left alone in certain combinations, because the wolf would eat the goat if they're left alone, and the goat would eat the cabbage if they're left alone. The key to solving this puzzle is to carefully plan the trips, ensuring that the farmer never leaves the wolf and goat alone together, nor the goat and cabbage alone together. So let's break it down step by step and figure out how the farmer can get everything across safely. The first step is for the farmer to take the goat across the river. This is a safe choice because the wolf will not eat the cabbage, and leaving the goat with the wolf would be dangerous. So the farmer's first trip should be to take the goat across the river. Once the goat is safely on the other side, the farmer needs to return alone to the original side. This is because he can't leave the wolf and the goat alone together, but he also needs to come back to get either the cabbage or the wolf. Now on the original side of the river, the farmer has the wolf and the cabbage. The next step is for the farmer to take the wolf across the river. This might sound like a risky move at first, but it's actually a safe decision. When the farmer takes the wolf across, he must leave the wolf on the other side and bring the goat back with him to the original side. The reason for this is simple. If the farmer leaves the wolf and goat alone together, the wolf will eat the goat. So he needs to bring the goat back with him. Now the farmer is back on the original side with the goat. The wolf is safely across the river. At this point, the farmer can safely take the cabbage across the river, leaving the goat behind. This is a safe trip because the cabbage and the wolf can be left together without any danger. Once the cabbage is safely on the other side, the farmer can return to the original side one more time to get the goat. This final trip is easy because the goat is the only remaining item, and there's no risk of anything going wrong. At the end of the day, the farmer has successfully transported all three items, his wolf, goat, and cabbage, across the river without any of them being eaten. The solution involves a careful sequence of trips, making sure that no risky combinations are left together. To recap, here are the steps the farmer needs to take. The farmer takes the goat across the river. The farmer returns alone to the original side. The farmer takes the wolf across the river. The farmer brings the goat back to the original side. The farmer takes the cabbage across the river. The farmer returns alone to the original side. The farmer takes the goat across the river. This series of moves ensures that the wolf and the goat are never left alone together, and neither are the goat and the cabbage. The puzzle seems tricky at first, but by following the right steps and keeping track of which items are on each side of the river, the farmer can solve the problem successfully. What's interesting about this puzzle is that it's an example of how small details and careful planning can make a big difference. In everyday life, we often encounter problems that seem more complicated than they actually are. But by breaking down the situation and thinking through the possible outcomes, we can come up with a simple solution. The farmer's problem is a good reminder that sometimes the best way to solve a tricky situation is by taking a step back and considering all the options before acting. This puzzle also teaches us the value of problem solving through logical steps. Instead of jumping to conclusions or trying to solve everything at once, the farmer focuses on one small decision at a time. Each trip across the river is thought through carefully, and the farmer adapts his strategy based on what's happening at each stage of the journey. Another key takeaway from the puzzle is the importance of risk management. The farmer knows that leaving the wolf and goat alone together would lead to disaster. And the same goes for leaving the goat and the cabbage. So by planning his trips wisely, he avoids any potential risks. This mirrors how in real-life situations, careful thought and planning can help us avoid risks and navigate challenges more effectively. The farmer's problem is a great example of how puzzles and riddles can be more than just entertainment. They can serve as a mental exercise, helping us sharpen our problem-solving skills and think more clearly. By approaching the puzzle step by step and considering the best course of action for each part of the journey, the farmer solves the problem and ensures that all three items make it safely across the river. In the end, the farmer's success is due to his ability to think logically, plan carefully, and manage risks. These are skills that can be applied to many other situations in life. Whether we're dealing with complex problems at work, at home, or in any other area of our lives, the farmer's problem teaches us that with the right approach and careful planning, we can solve even the most difficult challenges. A man rides the elevator to floor 10 in the morning, but only to floor 7 at night, and walks the rest. The question is, why does he do this? At first glance, this might seem like odd behavior. Why would he take the elevator up to the 10th floor in the morning, but stop at the 7th floor at night? The answer lies in a simple detail about the man's situation, something that explains why he behaves this way without any further mystery. The key to understanding this riddle is to think about the man's physical limitations. One possibility is that the man is short. He may not be tall enough to reach the button for the 10th floor when he returns in the evening. This is a common explanation for puzzles like this one, and it works perfectly here. In the morning, when the man leaves for work, he's likely dressed and ready to go, perhaps wearing shoes that make him a bit taller. So when he enters the elevator, he can press the button for the 10th floor easily. But at night, when he returns, he might be in more casual attire, perhaps wearing slippers or other footwear that makes him shorter. In this case, he would be unable to reach the button for the 10th floor. The highest button he could reach would be for the 7th floor, so he rides the elevator to floor 7 and then walks the rest of the way to the 10th floor. This explanation makes sense when we think about how elevators work. The buttons inside the elevator are typically at a set height, and someone who is very short might find it difficult to reach the higher buttons. So if the man is short and can only reach the button for the 7th floor at night, he would have to get off at that floor and walk the rest of the way to his apartment on the 10th floor. This scenario is common in puzzles like this, where the explanation relies on an overlooked physical factor. The man's height, or lack of it, is the key reason for his behavior. He has no trouble getting to the 10th floor in the morning because he is able to press the button. But when he's in a more casual state, such as in slippers or after a long day, he simply cannot reach the button for the 10th floor. So he rides the elevator as high as he can and then walks the rest of the way. Let's think of another possible scenario to explain this. Imagine the man has some sort of temporary condition or injury that makes it difficult for him to walk long distances in the evening. Perhaps during the day, he is able to take the elevator to the 10th floor without any issue. But by the time he comes back in the evening, he may be feeling tired or experiencing discomfort that makes walking the full 10 floors more difficult. In this case, he might choose to stop at floor 7 and walk the remaining distance, knowing that it's less tiring than walking all the way from floor 1 or taking the elevator to the very top. Another possibility is that the man lives in an older building where the elevator system is not fully functional. Maybe at night, the elevator doesn't go all the way to the 10th floor due to maintenance issues, or there could be some sort of limitation in the building's elevator system that only allows the elevator to go as high as floor 7 after a certain time of day. In this case, the man would have no choice but to get off at floor 7 and walk the rest of the way. This could be another logical reason for his behavior, especially if the elevator has a reputation for malfunctioning or only running to certain floors at night. While these are all plausible explanations, the most likely reason for the man's behavior is the one about his height. This riddle plays on the idea that we don't always consider small details, like how height can affect someone's ability to perform simple tasks, such as pressing a button in an elevator. The fact that the man can reach the button for the 10th floor in the morning, but not at night, is a subtle detail that helps solve the puzzle. Another aspect of the riddle is that it asks us to think about how people's daily routines might change based on their physical state or circumstances. We often get used to thinking that people behave in predictable ways, especially when they're using something like an elevator. But this puzzle challenges us to look beyond the obvious and consider factors like height, energy levels, or building limitations that can influence someone's behavior. In addition to height or physical limitations, we could consider the man's schedule. Perhaps his morning routine is different from his evening routine, leading to a change in his behavior. Maybe he's in a hurry in the morning and doesn't want to waste time by stopping at a lower floor. By contrast, at night, he might be more relaxed and less concerned with efficiency, so he takes the elevator as far as it will go and then walks the rest of the way. This kind of small difference in routine could explain why he behaves differently at different times of the day. It's also possible that the man is simply tired after a long day at work. If he's been on his feet for hours, walking all the way to the 10th floor at night could feel like too much, so he opts for the easiest solution, taking the elevator as high as he can and then walking the rest of the way when the elevator stops. In the morning, when he's fresh and ready to go, he might not mind taking the elevator all the way to the 10th floor because he feels more energetic. This riddle, like many others, encourages us to think about why people behave the way they do. It's easy to assume that everyone acts the same way in similar situations, but in reality, there are often small details that influence our decisions and behaviors. Whether it's something as simple as being tall enough to reach a button or feeling tired after a long day, these factors can have a big impact on how we approach everyday tasks. In the case of this man and his elevator ride, the puzzle isn't just about the elevator itself, but about understanding the small, often unnoticed aspects of life that affect our actions. By considering things like height, fatigue, and the time of day, we can gain a deeper understanding of why people might make certain choices. It's these kinds of puzzles that make us think differently about the world around us and how small details can shape our experiences. This situation might also point to the importance of paying attention to the context when solving puzzles. The solution often lies not in the obvious facts, but in the subtle clues that require us to think outside the box. In this case, understanding why the man behaves differently at different times of the day leads us to the simple conclusion that his height is the key factor, which explains his actions both in the morning and at night.
You have 12 coins, and one of them is fake. The fake coin is either heavier or lighter than the others, but you don't know which one. The challenge is to find the fake coin using a balanced scale, and you can only make 3 weighings. The question is, How do you find the fake coin in just 3 uses of the balance scale? To solve this, you need to think about how to divide the coins and make the best use of each weighing. The key is to break the problem down into manageable pieces, using logic and the limited number of weighings to narrow down which coin is fake and whether it is heavier or lighter. The process relies on efficiently dividing the coins into groups and using each weighing to eliminate as many coins as possible. Let's go through a clear, step-by-step approach to solving this puzzle. Start by dividing the 12 coins into 3 groups of 4 coins each. Label these groups as Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3. Now take 2 groups of 4 coins, let's say Group 1 and Group 2, and place them on the balance scale. There are 3 possible outcomes from this weighing. If the scale is balanced, this means that all the coins in Group 1 and Group 2 are genuine. Therefore, the fake coin must be in Group 3. Now, you only need to find the fake coin among the 4 coins in Group 3. If the scale tips to one side, this means the fake coin is in the heavier or lighter group, depending on whether the fake coin is heavier or lighter. At this point, you now know which group contains the fake coin. Let's assume, for this explanation, that the scale tips, showing that one group is heavier. That means the fake coin is in the heavier group, and you need to determine which coin is fake and whether it is heavier or lighter. After this first weighing, you have narrowed the problem down to just 4 coins. You've either identified the group with the fake coin, or you've narrowed it to Group 3. Now you can use the second weighing to further reduce the possibilities. Let's go back to the 2 main possibilities. If Group 1 and Group 2 were balanced, and Group 3 contains the fake coin, take 3 coins from Group 3 and place 2 of them on the balance scale. There are 3 possible outcomes from this second weighing. A. If the scale is balanced, this means that the fake coin is the one you did not place on the scale. You now know that one of the remaining 3 coins is fake, and you can determine which one by simply comparing it to one of the known good coins. B. If the scale tips, this means that one of the 2 coins on the scale is the fake coin. You now know which coin is fake and whether it is heavier or lighter based on which side of the scale tips. You can also identify whether it is heavier or lighter by simply observing which side of the scale dips. If Group 1 and Group 2 were not balanced and one of them contains the fake coin, in this case, you've already identified the group containing the fake coin. Now, take 3 coins from the group that was heavier or lighter based on your first weighing. Place 2 of these coins on the balance scale for your second weighing. There are 3 possible outcomes. A. If the scale is balanced, this means that the fake coin is the one you did not place on the scale. Now you just need to check if it's heavier or lighter based on the result of the first weighing. B. If the scale tips, this means that one of the 2 coins on the scale is the fake coin, and you can tell whether it is heavier or lighter based on which side dips. After the second weighing, you have only 1 or 2 coins remaining in the group containing the fake coin. The third and final weighing is straightforward. If you have 2 coins left, simply place 1 on each side of the balance scale. The fake coin will be the one that tips the scale, and you'll know whether it is heavier or lighter based on which side dips. If you're down to 1 coin, you already know that it is the fake coin. To recap, here's how you proceed. Divide the 12 coins into 3 groups of 4. Weigh 2 groups against each other. If the scale is balanced, the fake coin is in the third group. If the scale tips, the fake coin is in the heavier or lighter group, depending on the tilt. For the second weighing, take 3 coins from the group identified in the first weighing. either the unbalanced group or the third group if the first weighing was balanced. Weigh two of these coins against each other. If the scale is balanced, the fake coin is the one you didn't place on the scale. If the scale tips, you now know which coin is fake and whether it's heavier or lighter. For the third weighing, if you have 2 coins left, place one on each side of the scale. The fake coin will tip the scale. If you have just 1 coin left, it is the fake one. By using this method, you can identify the fake coin and whether it's heavier or lighter in just 3 weighings. This puzzle illustrates how, with limited resources, in this case, only 3 uses of a balance scale, you can logically eliminate possibilities and narrow down the potential answers. Each weighing is strategically designed to give you the maximum amount of information possible, reducing the number of coins to be considered in each step. This solution works efficiently by breaking the problem down into smaller, more manageable parts, ensuring that each weighing is used to its fullest potential. By dividing the coins into groups and systematically eliminating possibilities, you can solve the puzzle with precision and confidence.
Imagine standing in front of 2 doors. One of the doors leads to heaven, while the other leads to hell. You're also standing in front of 2 guards, one who always tells the truth and one who always lies. You can only ask one question, and your objective is clear. You need to figure out which door leads to heaven. But there's a catch. Given that you don't know which guard is which, and you only have one question, how can you be sure to choose the correct door at first? This may seem like a complicated problem. The fact that you have only one question to ask and that one guard always lies while the other always tells the truth might make it seem as though you are stuck in a situation with no clear solution. But if you think about the guard's behavior and how their answers are linked to each other, you'll see that it's actually possible to devise a clever strategy to guarantee you pick the right door. The key to solving this puzzle lies in understanding the nature of the guard's behavior. One guard always tells the truth, and the other always lies. This means that if you ask the truth teller a question, you'll get a truthful answer. If you ask the liar a question, you'll get a false answer. But what if you could ask them a question in such a way that both answers, no matter who you ask, would help you deduce the correct door? That's the trick. The one question you need to ask either of the guards is, if I were to ask the other guard which door leads to heaven, what would he say? This question is simple, yet powerful. It forces both guards into a situation where their answers will point to the wrong door. And that's exactly what you want. By carefully analyzing how each guard would respond to this question, you can determine which door leads to heaven. Let's break down how this question works in detail. We'll go through the reasoning step by step to see why it is the perfect question to ask. Scenario 1. Asking the truth teller. If you ask the truth teller, if I were to ask the other guard which door leads to heaven, what would he say? The truth teller will give you an honest answer about what the liar would say. Since the liar always lies, the liar would point to the wrong door. So the truth teller will truthfully tell you that the liar would point to the wrong door. This means the door that the truth teller points to is the wrong one. Scenario 2. Asking the liar. If you ask the liar the same question, if I were to ask the other guard which door leads to heaven, what would he say? The liar will lie about what the truth teller would say. The truth teller would point to the correct door, but since the liar always lies, he will tell you that the truth teller would point to the wrong door. Again, this means the liar's answer will also point to the wrong door. In both scenarios, whether you ask the truth teller or the liar, the answer you get will always be the wrong door. But that's exactly what you want. Once you know that both guards will point you to the wrong door, you simply need to choose the opposite door. The door that isn't indicated by either guard is the correct one, the door that leads to heaven. Let's walk through a concrete example to further illustrate the process. Suppose you're facing 2 doors. You don't know which one leads to heaven and which one leads to hell. In front of you are 2 guards, Guard A and Guard B. You don't know which guard tells the truth and which one lies. You don't know which door is which. You decide to ask guard A the question. If I were to ask guard B which door leads to heaven, what would he say? If guard A is the truth teller, he will truthfully tell you that guard B, the liar, would point to the wrong door. If guard A is the liar, he will lie about what guard B, the truth teller, would say. The truth teller would point to the correct door, but the liar will tell you that guard B would point to the wrong door. In both cases, guard A points you to the wrong door. Knowing this, you simply choose the opposite door, and you have found the one that leads to heaven. What makes this question so powerful is that it works regardless of which guard you ask. Whether you ask the truth teller or the liar, the logic forces both guards to point to the wrong door. This clever use of the guards' predictable behavior allows you to reliably choose the correct door without any ambiguity. Now, let's think about why this approach works. The puzzle works because you're not asking which door leads to heaven directly. Instead, you're asking about what the other guard would say, which forces both guards to reveal the wrong door. This strategy takes advantage of the guard's behavior, and through a logical construction of the question, it ensures that you always have the correct information to choose the right door. The key is that you're manipulating the question in a way that neutralizes the potential confusion of not knowing which guard is which. This puzzle is a great example of how a simple, well-thought-out question can simplify what initially seems like a complex problem. It also demonstrates the power of logic. By asking the right question and understanding how the guards' responses interact with each other, you can eliminate uncertainty and find the correct solution. What could have been a tricky situation with no clear way of knowing which guard tells the truth and which one lies becomes straightforward through careful reasoning. So basically, the puzzle teaches us a valuable lesson. When faced with uncertainty, sometimes the best way to navigate a situation is by thinking outside the box. By framing your question in a way that accounts for the behavior of both parties, in this case, the guards, you can find a clear solution even when the situation seems confusing. The cleverness of the question lies in how it forces both guards, no matter their behavior, to lead you to the same conclusion, showing you the wrong door. From there, choosing the opposite door guarantees success. The puzzle is a reminder that with the right approach and a bit of logical thinking, even the most puzzling situations can be solved.
5 people stand in a line, each wearing either a red or blue hat. They can see the hats of the people in front of them, but not their own. The task is simple. Each person must guess the color of their own hat. The challenge is that they must do this without communicating with each other, and they must make their guesses based on what they see in front of them. The question is, what is the best strategy for these 5 people to maximize their chances of survival? Meaning guessing their hat color correctly. At first glance, it seems like a random guessing game. After all, each person only has the information about the hats in front of them, and they can't directly communicate with others. However, there is actually a clever strategy that allows the group to maximize their chances of survival, where only one person might have to guess their hat color, and the rest can guess with certainty. The key to solving this puzzle is using a predetermined strategy based on the hats the people see in front of them. To explain how the strategy works, let's first describe the situation in more detail. Each person can see the hats in front of them, but not their own. The first person in the line can see the hats of the 4 people in front of them. The second person can see the hats of the 3 people in front of them, and so on. The 5th person at the back of the line cannot see anyone else's hat. The goal of the strategy is to minimize the number of incorrect guesses. With a good strategy, only one person will need to guess, and everyone else can guess with certainty. So how do we do this? The group can use a strategy that involves the concept of parity, which means whether a number is odd or even. In this case, the number refers to the number of red hats in the line. Before the game starts, the group agrees on a system where they will count the number of red hats they see and use that information to make an educated guess about their own hat color. Here's how the strategy works. The person at the back of the line the fifth person, will make their guess based on the total number of red hats they see in front of them. The important part is that they will guess in such a way that their guess communicates whether they see an even or odd number of red hats. This can be done by agreeing that a certain guess will correspond to even and the other guess will correspond to odd. For instance, if the person at the back sees an odd number of red hats, they guess red. If they see an even number of red hats, they guess blue. The second person in line can see the hats of the four people in front of them, but they already know the parity of red hats that the first person indicated. For example, if the first person said red, the second person knows that they should count the number of red hats in front of them and adjust their guess accordingly. If they see an even number of red hats, but the first person said red, then the second person knows their hat must be red to make the total number of red hats odd. If they see an odd number of red hats, but the first person said blue, they will know their hat must be red to keep the total number of red hats even. The third person can see the hats of the three people in front of them and can use the same reasoning. They already know the parity of red hats from the first two people's guesses, and they can adjust their guess based on what they see. By this point, they will know with certainty whether their own hat is red or blue. The fourth person follows the same process. They see the hats of the two people in front of them and use the information from the previous people's guesses to determine the parity of red hats and guess accordingly. The fifth person in the line, who can see the hats of everyone in front of them, makes their guess based on the number of red hats they see. This person has the least information since they don't know their own hat color, but their guess will set the tone for the rest of the guesses. In this strategy, the key is that the first person's guess, the one at the back of the line, serves as a signal to everyone else. The first person uses their guess to communicate the parity of red hats they see, and then the rest of the people adjust their guesses accordingly. Since everyone except the first person can see the hats of others in front of them, they can use the information from the first person's guess to determine the correct color of their own hat. Let's walk through an example to make this clearer. Imagine that the hats of the five people are arranged as follows: red, blue, red, blue, red. The first person in the line, the one at the back, sees the hats of the four people in front of them. In this case, they see 2 red hats and 2 blue hats. Since there are an even number of red hats, they will guess blue to indicate that the total number of red hats is even. They may guess incorrectly, but they are communicating important information to the others. The second person in line sees the 3 hats in front of them. They see 1 red hat and 2 blue hats. They also know that the first person guessed blue, which indicated an even number of red hats. Since they see 1 red hat, they must know that their own hat is red to keep the total number of red hats odd. So the second person guesses red. The third person sees the 2 hats in front of them. They know that the first person guessed blue, indicating an even number of red hats. They see 1 red hat, so they know their own hat must be blue to keep the total number of red hats even. So the third person guesses blue. The fourth person sees only 1 hat in front of them. They know the first person guessed blue, and they see 1 red hat, meaning their own hat must be red to keep the total number of red hats odd. So the fourth person guesses red. The fifth person, who can see everyone else's hat, sees 2 red hats and 2 blue hats. Since they already know that there are an even number of red hats, they guess blue, which is correct. In this example, 4 out of the 5 people guess correctly. The first person might guess incorrectly, but they are providing the key information that allows everyone else to guess their hat color correctly. By using this strategy, the group maximizes their chances of survival, with only one person needing to guess their hat color, and the rest making correct guesses with certainty. This strategy works because it takes advantage of the parity of the red hats. Each person's guess is not just a random guess, but a carefully calculated response based on the information provided by others. By setting up a system of communication before the guessing begins, The group ensures that the majority will survive and guess their hat colors correctly, even with only one person needing to guess without certainty.
In this puzzle, 3 missionaries and 3 cannibals need to cross a river. The boat can only carry 2 people at a time, and the key rule is that cannibals must never outnumber the missionaries on either side of the river. If at any time the cannibals outnumber the missionaries, the cannibals will overpower them. The challenge is to figure out how to get everyone across the river safely, with no one left behind or in danger. At first glance, this seems like a tricky problem. The idea of balancing the number of missionaries and cannibals while keeping the boat capacity in mind makes it seem like there are many potential paths to failure. However, by thinking through the movements carefully and using a step-by-step strategy, it's possible to figure out how to get all 6 people across the river safely without breaking the rules. Let's break down the steps that must be taken to solve this puzzle. The boat can carry only 2 people at a time, and the goal is to ensure that cannibals never outnumber missionaries at any point. So, a logical strategy is to move people in such a way that each crossing works to balance out the numbers and ensures that, when someone goes over, the ratio of missionaries and cannibals remains safe on both sides of the river. Here's how it can be done. 2 cannibals cross the river first. This is a good starting move because on the initial side of the river, the number of missionaries and cannibals is balanced. By sending 2 cannibals across first, we're not violating the rule of cannibals outnumbering missionaries, since there are still 3 missionaries and 1 cannibal on the original side. When the 2 cannibals reach the other side, one of them rows the boat back to the starting side. This move ensures that the missionaries are still safe on the starting side. 1 cannibal returns with the boat. After the 2 cannibals cross, one of them comes back, bringing the boat to the original side. Now, we have 2 cannibals on the far side, and 3 missionaries and 1 cannibal on the original side. This also helps maintain the balance because no cannibals outnumber the missionaries on either side of the river. 2 missionaries cross the river. Now 2 missionaries cross the river to the other side. On the far side of the river, there are now 2 cannibals and 2 missionaries. Back on the original side, there are 1 cannibal and 1 missionary left. At this point, the balance is maintained because cannibals do not outnumber missionaries. 1 cannibal returns. Once the 2 missionaries are across, 1 cannibal from the far side returns with the boat. Now on the far side, there are 1 cannibal and 2 missionaries, and on the original side, we have 2 cannibals and 1 missionary. This still keeps the balance intact, with no cannibals outnumbering the missionaries. 2 cannibals cross the river again. 2 cannibals from the original side cross over to the far side. Now, there are 3 cannibals and 2 missionaries on the far side, and 1 missionary left on the original side. At this point, the ratio is still safe because there are no cannibals left to outnumber the missionaries on the original side. 1 cannibal returns. Now that the 2 cannibals have crossed, one of them returns to the original side. This leaves 2 cannibals and 2 missionaries on the far side, while 1 cannibal and 1 missionary are on the original side. Finally, 2 missionaries cross. To complete the solution, the final 2 missionaries cross the river together. At this point, all 3 missionaries and all 3 cannibals are safely across the river. Each step in this solution works by carefully balancing the number of cannibals and missionaries on either side of the river. At no point do the cannibals ever outnumber the missionaries on either side, which ensures that no one is left in a dangerous situation. The strategy revolves around sending the cannibals back and forth, ensuring that the missionaries are never left alone with a larger number of cannibals. The key to solving this puzzle is understanding how to manipulate the numbers of people on both sides of the river to maintain a safe balance at all times. By ensuring that the number of cannibals is never greater than the number of missionaries, you prevent the risk of the cannibals overpowering the missionaries. This involves moving people back and forth in a series of steps that allows both groups to cross safely without breaking the rule. One of the most important things to realize when solving this puzzle is that sending two cannibals across at the start can help keep the balance in check, as it allows the missionaries to cross without the fear of being outnumbered. From there, the strategy of sending one cannibal back to keep the balance intact while moving the missionaries over ensures a steady flow without creating a situation where the missionaries are at risk. While the puzzle might seem complicated initially, once you break it down into individual steps, it becomes clear that the solution lies in managing the number of cannibals and missionaries on either side of the river through careful movement. The process of sending two people across, then bringing one person back, ensures that the numbers never get out of hand. Throughout the puzzle, the idea is to move the cannibals in such a way that they help maintain the balance while the missionaries gradually cross. This method allows everyone to eventually make it to the other side safely without anyone being outnumbered at any point. By thinking through the puzzle logically and keeping track of the numbers on each side, you can easily work your way through this seemingly tricky problem. The solution involves more than just crossing the river. It's about managing the groups, ensuring they don't exceed the necessary balance. In this puzzle, 3 missionaries and 3 cannibals need to cross a river. The boat can only carry 2 people at a time, and the key rule is that cannibals must never outnumber the missionaries on either side of the river. If at any time the cannibals outnumber the missionaries, the cannibals will overpower them. The challenge is to figure out how to get everyone across the river safely, with no one left behind or in danger. At first glance, this seems like a tricky problem. The idea of balancing the number of missionaries and cannibals while keeping the boat capacity in mind makes it seem like there are many potential paths to failure. However, by thinking through the movements carefully and using a step-by-step strategy, it's possible to figure out how to get all 6 people across the river safely without breaking the rules. Let's break down the steps that must be taken to solve this puzzle. The boat can carry only 2 people at a time, and the goal is to ensure that cannibals never outnumber missionaries at any point. So, a logical strategy is to move people in such a way that each crossing works to balance out the numbers and ensures that, when someone goes over, the ratio of missionaries and cannibals remains safe on both sides of the river. Here's how it can be done. 2 cannibals cross the river first. This is a good starting move because, on the initial side of the river, the number of missionaries and cannibals is balanced. By sending 2 cannibals across first, we're not violating the rule of cannibals outnumbering missionaries, since there are still 3 missionaries and 1 cannibal on the original side. When the 2 cannibals reach the other side, one of them rows the boat back to the starting side. This move ensures that the missionaries are still safe on the starting side. 1 cannibal returns with the boat. After the 2 cannibals cross, one of them comes back, bringing the boat to the original side. Now, we have 2 cannibals on the far side, and 3 missionaries and 1 cannibal on the original side. This also helps maintain the balance because no cannibals outnumber the missionaries on either side of the river. 2 missionaries cross the river. Now, 2 missionaries cross the river to the other side. On the far side of the river, there are now 2 cannibals and 2 missionaries. Back on the original side, there are 1 cannibal and 1 missionary left. At this point, the balance is maintained because cannibals do not outnumber missionaries. 1 cannibal returns. Once the 2 missionaries are across, 1 cannibal from the far side returns with the boat. Now, on the far side, there are 1 cannibal and 2 missionaries, and on the original side,
we have 2 cannibals and 1 missionary. This still keeps the balance intact, with no cannibals outnumbering the missionaries. 2 cannibals cross the river again. 2 cannibals from the original side cross over to the far side. Now there are 3 cannibals and 2 missionaries on the far side and 1 missionary left on the original side. At this point, the ratio is still safe because there are no cannibals left to outnumber the missionaries on the original side. 1 cannibal returns. Now that the 2 cannibals have crossed, one of them returns to the original side. This leaves 2 cannibals and 2 missionaries on the far side, while 1 cannibal and 1 missionary are on the original side. Finally, 2 missionaries cross. To complete the solution, the final 2 missionaries cross the river together. At this point, all 3 missionaries and all 3 cannibals are safely across the river. Each step in this solution works by carefully balancing the number of cannibals and missionaries on either side of the river. At no point do the cannibals ever outnumber the missionaries on either side, which ensures that no one is left in a dangerous situation. The strategy revolves around sending the cannibals back and forth, ensuring that the missionaries are never left alone with a larger number of cannibals. The key to solving this puzzle was understanding how to manipulate the numbers of people on both sides of the river to maintain a safe balance at all times. By ensuring that the number of cannibals is never greater than the number of missionaries, you prevent the risk of the cannibals overpowering the missionaries. This involves moving people back and forth in a series of steps that allows both groups to cross safely without breaking the rule. One of the most important things to realize when solving this puzzle is that sending 2 cannibals across at the start can help keep the balance in check, as it allows the missionaries to cross without the fear of being outnumbered. From there, the strategy of sending 1 cannibal back to keep the balance intact while moving the missionaries over ensures a steady flow without creating a situation where the missionaries are at risk. While the puzzle might seem complicated initially, once you break it down into individual steps, it becomes clear that the solution lies in managing the number of cannibals and missionaries on either side of the river through careful movement. The process of sending 2 people across, then bringing 1 person back, ensures that the numbers never get out of hand. Throughout the puzzle, the idea is to move the cannibals in such a way that they help maintain the balance while the missionaries gradually cross. This method allows everyone to eventually make it to the other side safely, without anyone being outnumbered at any point. By thinking through the puzzle logically and keeping track of the numbers on each side, you can easily work your way through this seemingly tricky problem. The solution involves more than just crossing the river. It's about managing the groups, ensuring they don't exceed the necessary balance. In this puzzle, you are given a Roman numeral equation, vi plus I equals ix. The Roman numerals represent numbers as follows. Vi stands for 6, I stands for 1, ix stands for 9. At first glance, the equation vi plus I equals ix is clearly incorrect, because 6 plus 1 equals 7, not 9. The challenge is to figure out how to make this equation true by moving only 1 matchstick in such a way that the equation becomes correct. It seems like a straightforward problem at first, but there's a trick hidden within it. The trick lies in understanding how Roman numerals are formed using matchsticks and how small adjustments can change the meaning of those numerals. To solve this puzzle, we need to focus on the structure of Roman numerals and how they can be represented visually with matchsticks. Roman numerals are made up of specific combinations of characters, and changing just 1 matchstick can significantly alter their value. So, let's break down the components of the equation and figure out where and how we can make our adjustment. Breaking down the Roman numerals. The Roman numerals in the equation are vi, I, and ix. Let's look at how each of these is constructed with matchsticks. Vi.
The Roman numeral for 6 is formed using two characters, V and I.
The V is made up of two matchsticks arranged in a V shape, and the I is a single matchstick.
Together, these two matchsticks and one single matchstick create the number 6, I. The Roman numeral for 1 is represented by a single matchstick placed vertically. This is the simplest form of a Roman numeral, consisting of just one matchstick. IX, the Roman numeral for 9, consists of two characters, I and X. The I is again a single matchstick, and the X is created by crossing two matchsticks to form the letter X. Together, the I and X form the Roman numeral for 9. Analyzing the puzzle, the equation VI plus I equals IX doesn't hold true because 6 plus 1 equals 7, not 9. The challenge is to find a way to move just one matchstick and make the equation true. In this case, we need to carefully consider how to alter one of the numerals by moving a single matchstick. The real solution lies in recognizing that a subtle change to the arrangement of matchsticks can turn the incorrect equation into a valid one. Option 1, changing the I in VI to create VIII. One potential solution involves adjusting the I in VI. If we take the matchstick from the I and reposition it, we can transform the Roman numeral VI into VIII, which represents 7. By doing so, we create the equation VIII equals IX. This is now a valid equation because 7 plus 1 equals 9. Let's go through the reasoning behind this change in more detail. Initially, VI represents 6 and I represents 1. If we move the matchstick from the I in VI and turn it into another V, we now have VIII, which is 7. The equation then becomes VIII equals IX, which is true because 7 plus 1 does indeed equal 9. This is the simplest and most effective solution, where the one matchstick moved creates a correct equation. Option 2, altering the V in VI to create XII. Another possibility might be to change the V in VI. If we move one of the matchsticks from the V in VI and place it so that it forms an X, we could change VI into XII, which represents the Roman numeral for 11. However, this doesn't solve the problem because XII would equal 12, not 9. Therefore, this approach doesn't work. The equation would no longer be valid since 11 plus 1 equals 12, which is clearly incorrect. Option 3, moving the matchstick in IX. Another possible option might be to move a matchstick in the IX numeral. However, this doesn't provide a viable solution either. If we moved a matchstick from the I in IX, we would either end up with an incomplete numeral or transform it into something that is not a valid Roman numeral. For example, taking the matchstick from the I and placing it elsewhere might break the IX down in a way that it no longer represents 9, leaving us with an invalid numeral. Therefore, this option is not effective in solving the puzzle. A closer look at the solution. The key to solving this puzzle lies in understanding the behavior of Roman numerals and their composition using matchsticks. When the puzzle states that you can move just one matchstick, it encourages you to think about how a small change to the structure of one numeral can lead to a significant shift in the equation. The initial incorrect equation, VI plus I equals IX, is only one matchstick away from being correct. By changing the I in VI to a V, we transform the numeral for 6, VI, into the numeral for 7, VII, and the equation then reads VII plus I equals IX. This new equation is accurate because 7 plus 1 indeed equals 9, and we have successfully solved the puzzle with a single move. Why this works? This solution works because Roman numerals have specific rules for how they are formed, and a slight change to the arrangement of the matchsticks can result in a completely different value. Roman numerals are often designed with relatively simple and direct representations of numbers. This means that small adjustments
can drastically change the equation's validity. In this case, the solution works because the change from VI to VII creates a valid equation. It's also important to note that the puzzle's constraints allow only one matchstick to be moved, which limits the number of possible solutions and forces us to think critically about how the numerals are structured. By focusing on this one simple change, we find that the puzzle becomes solvable. The equation VI plus I equals IX was incorrect because it implied that 6 plus 1 equals 7, which is not true. By moving just one matchstick, we convert VI into VII, resulting in the correct equation, VII plus I equals IX. This solution adheres to the rules of Roman numerals and satisfies the condition that only one matchstick is moved. This puzzle is a perfect example of how a small change can have a significant impact on the outcome. It's about recognizing how Roman numerals are structured and understanding how a single adjustment can turn an incorrect equation into a correct one. By moving just one matchstick from the I in VI to form VII, we solve the equation and make it true. The puzzle encourages critical thinking and demonstrates how even the smallest adjustments can lead to a correct solution.
Imagine you are faced with a rather peculiar and interesting scenario. 100 lions, all equally hungry, are standing before a cage that contains a single, delicious piece of meat. However, there is a catch. If any one of the lions eats the meat, it will trigger a trap, causing the cage to close and trap the lion inside. The question that arises is, how many lions can enter the cage without any of them getting trapped? At first glance, this might seem like a straightforward problem. The immediate assumption might be that only one lion can go into the cage. After all, if only one lion is allowed to enter, the scenario seems simple. The lion goes in, eats the meat, and the trap closes. But things are not as simple as they seem, and a deeper analysis reveals a more complex solution that involves cooperation, careful thought, and patience. Each lion knows that the trap will be triggered if it eats the meat. However, all the lions are equally hungry and can clearly see the meat sitting in the cage. This creates a dilemma. Every lion wants the meat, but none wants to be trapped. If one lion acts impulsively and eats the meat, the trap will close, trapping that lion inside the cage, while the others remain outside. So how can the lions avoid this fate while still satisfying their hunger? The solution requires more than just individual thinking. It requires a level of cooperation and strategy among the lions. The first thing to recognize is that the lions cannot simply act individually. If one lion were to go into the cage and eat the meat, the trap would inevitably be triggered, and that lion would be trapped inside. This means that the lions need to think ahead and come up with a strategy that ensures none of them gets trapped. Each lion understands the potential consequences of eating the meat, so the lions must find a way to coordinate their actions to avoid triggering the trap. The key to solving this puzzle lies in the fact that the lions must cooperate to avoid the trap. Since all the lions are equally hungry and share the same goal of eating the meat, they must work together to achieve that goal without setting off the trap. The lions' collective strategy must ensure that no single lion acts before the others and causes the trap to close. One possible approach could involve having all the lions enter the cage at once. Now you might be thinking, but doesn't that just mean that one lion will still eat the meat, causing the trap to close? Not necessarily. The trap might be designed to catch only one lion at a time. In this case, if multiple lions enter the cage together, the trap may not be triggered, because the trap might only be activated when one lion enters alone and eats the meat. If several lions are in the cage at the same time, the trap may not be triggered, and the lions can work together to share the meat without any of them getting trapped.
However, there is an important catch. The lions must coordinate their actions so that no single lion eats the meat before the others. Even if all the lions enter the cage together, if one lion eats the meat too quickly, the trap will be triggered and that lion will be trapped. This means that the lions must have a clear understanding that they must wait for everyone to enter the cage before they attempt to eat the meat. No lion can be too hasty, and all must act together. The strategy also involves patience. While the lions are all hungry, they must resist the urge to eat the meat prematurely. Each lion knows that if they eat the meat too soon, they will be trapped, and no one wants that. So, it's a matter of holding off on their immediate desires for the sake of the collective well-being. The lions must trust that by working together and waiting for the right moment, they will all be able to enjoy the meal without any of them being trapped. The puzzle also emphasizes the importance of cooperation. Even though the lions are all hungry, they must set aside their individual desires and work toward a shared goal. This requires a level of communication, either through instinct or learned behavior, that enables them to act together as a unified group. The lions must coordinate their movements, ensuring that no one lion acts too quickly or selfishly. If all the lions remain patient and act as a team, they can achieve the goal of eating the meat without anyone being left behind or trapped. This solution works because it involves the lions collaborating to avoid triggering the trap. If they are able to act in unison, they can sidestep the danger of the trap and share the meat. The cooperative approach is the key to success in this scenario. It's not about individual action, but rather about the collective effort to solve the problem. In this case, the group as a whole must take responsibility for ensuring that no one lion eats the meat prematurely and triggers the trap. One interesting aspect of this puzzle is the concept of thinking ahead and planning for the consequences of one's actions. Each lion knows the risks involved in eating the meat, and they must take those risks into account before they act. Rather than acting impulsively, they must consider the bigger picture. If they all work together and wait for the right moment, they will all benefit. The puzzle teaches a valuable lesson in patience, cooperation, and strategic thinking. In this puzzle, the solution seems to be straightforward once the lions understand the importance of working together. If they enter the cage together and refrain from eating the meat until everyone is inside, they can avoid triggering the trap. This simple solution relies on cooperation and trust among the lions, demonstrating that working as a team can often lead to a better outcome than acting alone. Now, the answer to the puzzle is that all 100 lions can go into the cage together. By coordinating their actions and ensuring that no one lion eats the meat prematurely, they can avoid triggering the trap and enjoy the meal together. This solution requires careful thinking and a willingness to cooperate. The lions must balance their hunger with the knowledge that acting impulsively will lead to disaster. By working together as a group, they can achieve their goal without anyone getting trapped.
On an island, everyone is required to wear a blue hat. The catch, however, is that no one knows their own hat color. They can only see the hats of others. To add to the confusion, the islanders are told that at least one person is wearing a blue hat, but no one can talk about the hats. The question that arises from this situation is, what happens next? How do the people on the island figure out their own hat colors? At first glance, it may seem like the situation is impossible. After all, no one knows their own hat color, and they aren't allowed to communicate with each other about what they see. However, there is a logical sequence of events that will unfold as the islanders begin to reason through the puzzle. The process involves a combination of observation, logical deduction, and time. Let's break down the situation step by step to understand how it unfolds. The setup: everyone on the island wears a blue hat, but no one knows their own hat color. They can see everyone else's hat color, but that's all they have to go on. They are also told that at least one person is wearing a blue hat, so they know the statement is true, but they don't know how to use that information yet. Importantly, they are not allowed to talk about their hats, so all they can do is observe the behavior of others. Initial thoughts. Each person can see the hats of everyone else on the island, but not their own. This creates a situation where everyone is aware that there must be at least one blue hat. But initially, there's no immediate way for anyone to determine their own hat color. If they were the only one with a blue hat, they could immediately figure out that their own hat must be blue. But in this case, there are many people, and no one knows how many blue hats there are in total. The key is that everyone starts with the assumption that they might not be wearing a blue hat themselves. The first day. On the first day, no one can definitively conclude the color of their own hat. If there were only one person with a blue hat, that person would instantly know their own hat color because they would see that everyone else is wearing a non-blue hat. Since no one makes any statements, it suggests that there are at least two people wearing blue hats. Everyone has observed that at least one other person is wearing a blue hat, so they start to think, maybe I'm wearing a blue hat too. The second day. Now everyone knows that there must be at least two blue hats. No one has made any conclusions yet, which tells them that if there were only two blue hats, those two individuals would have figured out their own hat colors on the first day. The fact that no one has yet spoken up leads everyone to deduce that there must be more than two people wearing blue hats. This creates a shift in thinking. Perhaps I am one of those people wearing a blue hat. The third day and beyond. The reasoning continues as each individual begins to understand that if there were only 3 blue hats, those 3 individuals would have figured it out by the third day, and so on. This process continues day by day. Each person waits and observes the others. As they observe, they realize that the number of blue hats must be larger than what they initially thought. The key here is that each person is using the information about the actions, or lack of actions, of others to adjust their own understanding. This puzzle works because of the way the information is passed through the group, not by direct communication, but through mutual observation and reasoning. The fact that no one acts or speaks on the first few days is itself a form of communication. It provides a signal to the islanders that the number of blue hats is greater than what they can see directly. For example, imagine there are 5 people on the island, all wearing blue hats. Each person sees the hats of the others, but doesn't know their own hat color. On the first day, no one speaks up because everyone sees at least one other person with a blue hat and doesn't know how many blue hats there actually are. On the second day, no one speaks either, which leads everyone to realize that there must be more than 2 blue hats. The process continues, with each day confirming the previous day's reasoning. As the days go on, the people on the island use the silence of the others as a clue about how many blue hats are in total. After a certain number of days, equal to the number of blue hats, everyone will come to the conclusion that they themselves must be wearing a blue hat. The reasoning is that if there were fewer than that number of blue hats, those wearing blue hats would have already figured it out sooner and spoken up. Since no one has spoken, the only explanation left is that everyone must be wearing blue hats. In this way, even though the islanders aren't allowed to talk about the hats, they can still figure out the truth through observation and logical deduction. They rely on the fact that silence and the lack of action provide crucial information about the number of blue hats present. This gradual unfolding of understanding demonstrates the power of logic and reasoning, even in a situation where communication is restricted. The key takeaway: the puzzle shows how logic can unfold step by step, even in seemingly complex or constrained situations. At first, it might appear that the lack of direct communication would lead to confusion or inaction. But in fact, the absence of communication itself is the key piece of information. The fact that no one speaks up tells everyone else that the number of blue hats is greater than 1. This reasoning builds on itself, and with each passing day, the islanders gather more and more clues. Eventually, they all arrive at the correct conclusion that they are all wearing blue hats.
This puzzle emphasizes how information, whether spoken or unspoken, can be shared and understood through careful observation and logic. It also illustrates how even under the constraints of not being able to talk or directly communicate, groups can still figure out complex problems using deductive reasoning. The resolution of the puzzle ultimately depends on the shared understanding that everyone can reason through the information they see and hear, or in this case, don't hear. The lack of immediate answers on the first few days provides a critical clue to the actual number of blue hats, and as the days pass, the solution becomes clear. By observing the actions or the lack of actions from the other islanders, everyone is able to deduce the truth of their own situation. In the end, everyone on the island will know that they are all wearing blue hats, and this realization will come about not through direct communication, but through the process of elimination and shared reasoning. The puzzle is a testament to the power of logic, patience, and observation. It teaches us that even when direct communication is not possible, information can still be shared, and solutions can still be found through careful analysis and mutual understanding.
Imagine you are standing next to a train track. Ahead of you, a runaway trolley is speeding down the track and heading straight for 5 people. You are in a position where you can pull a lever to divert the trolley to another track. On this second track, however, there is one person. You know that pulling the lever will save the 5 people, but it will directly cause the trolley to hit and kill the one person on the other track. The question is, do you pull the lever? At first, the decision seems clear. Pulling the lever would save 5 people, and it's hard to argue that saving more lives is the right choice. But as you think more deeply about it, the situation becomes more morally complex. You are faced with a classic ethical dilemma known as the trolley problem. It's a thought experiment that forces you to consider difficult questions about morality, responsibility, and the value of human life. On one hand, pulling the lever seems like the logical choice. By diverting the trolley, you would actively save 5 lives. In this view, the value of saving 5 people outweighs the value of saving 1, and therefore, pulling the lever becomes the morally correct action. This is often referred to as a utilitarian approach to ethics, where the goal is to maximize happiness or minimize harm for the greatest number of people. From this perspective, it is clear that saving 5 lives, even at the cost of 1, is the right thing to do. However, there's another side to this dilemma. Some might argue that pulling the lever is morally wrong because it involves actively making a decision to sacrifice 1 life for the sake of others. In this case, you are not just allowing the trolley to follow its natural course. You are choosing to redirect it, taking on the responsibility for causing the death of 1 person. This is an example of a deontological, ethical perspective which focuses on the morality of actions themselves rather than the consequences. In this view, your action of choosing to kill 1 person, even if it saves 5, is inherently wrong. To further complicate matters, consider the identity of the person on the second track. What if it's someone close to you? What if it's someone who you know will have a great impact on society? Does that change your decision? If the person on the second track is a stranger, it may feel easier to justify pulling the lever. But if the person is someone you care about, it may be much harder to make that choice, even if saving the 5 people seems like the right thing to do. This emotional factor plays a large role in ethical decision-making. It's one thing to abstractly consider the value of human life, but when the person at risk is someone you know personally, the choice becomes more personal and the decision becomes more difficult. Another consideration is the question of agency and responsibility. By pulling the lever, you are taking an active role in deciding who lives and who dies. You are not simply a bystander in this situation. You are making the choice that directly leads to the death of 1 person. This can weigh heavily on someone's conscience. On the other hand,
If you do nothing, you are still responsible for the death of 5 people, but you are not directly involved in the decision-making process. You could argue that by not pulling the lever, you are allowing the situation to unfold without intervening, but you are not taking the direct action of deciding who dies. Some people might prefer to remain passive in such a situation, feeling that it's not their place to make such a dire decision. To further delve into this issue, consider the implications of the scenario on a larger scale. If this trolley problem were to be a real-world situation, it would raise profound questions about how we value human life and make difficult decisions in crisis situations. It might force us to consider the implications of our actions in other areas of life, such as healthcare, war, or even environmental policy. How do we make decisions when faced with choosing between saving some people while harming others? In a way, this is a microcosm of the complex ethical decisions we face every day in the real world. Whether it's deciding how to allocate resources, making choices in life and death situations, or simply choosing who to prioritize in our daily lives, we are constantly balancing the needs and well-being of others. The trolley problem also brings up the issue of intention versus outcome. In the scenario, your intention in pulling the lever is not to kill someone, but to save 5 people. However, the outcome is that you still cause death. This brings to light a critical question. Should we judge actions solely by their consequences, or should we also consider the intentions behind them? In some moral systems, the outcome of an action is the most important factor. In others, the intention behind the action holds more weight. In this scenario, the intention is to minimize harm by saving the 5 people, but the outcome is a death. How do we balance these two factors when making decisions? As you consider all of these perspectives, you might start to realize that there is no simple answer to the trolley problem. It isn't a question of right or wrong in the traditional sense. It's about finding the approach that aligns best with your values and moral framework. The utilitarian view might argue that the 5 lives are worth more than 1, and thus, pulling the lever is the correct choice. The deontological perspective, on the other hand, might hold that actively deciding to sacrifice 1 person, regardless of the consequences, is morally unacceptable. There is also the emotional and personal factor that can make the decision more complicated, especially if you have a personal connection to the person on the second track. In real-life scenarios, decisions like these often come down to the context in which they occur and the values of the individuals making them. What's more important, the number of lives saved, the intention behind the action, or the emotional and moral weight of making the decision? Each person's answer will vary based on their own ethical views, life experiences, and personal beliefs. The trolley problem forces us to confront these questions and consider how we approach difficult decisions in our own lives. Ultimately, the trolley problem doesn't have a clear, universally accepted answer. It's a thought experiment that invites us to examine our moral values, the choices we make, and the consequences of our actions. The decision of whether to pull the lever is not only about the immediate outcome, but also about how we think about and prioritize human life, responsibility, and ethics. By reflecting on this puzzle, we come to a deeper understanding of how we make choices in situations where there is no perfect solution, and how those choices shape who we are.
Imagine you're faced with a word, and you're told that it contains 1 incorrect letter. If you remove that 1 incorrect letter, the word will be correct. Your task is to figure out what that word is. At first, this may sound like a puzzle with many possible answers, but with a little thinking, it becomes clear that the solution relies on understanding how a word can be altered by removing just 1 letter. The key to solving this puzzle is to focus on the structure of the word and the role each letter plays. In most cases, when we think of words, we don't often consider how small changes, like removing a single letter, can impact the entire meaning. But this puzzle requires you to think about the word as a whole and figure out which letter, when removed, will transform the word into something that makes sense. Let's start by considering the nature of words. Words are made up of letters, and each letter is crucial to forming the word's meaning. If one letter is incorrect, it can change the word's meaning or make it an incorrect or non-existent word. The challenge here is identifying the letter that, when removed, will make the word meaningful and correct. One approach to solving the puzzle is to consider common words that are similar to others but contain a small mistake. The incorrect letter might be one that is subtly out of place, yet its removal would make the word perfectly valid. The word might be familiar to you, but when you remove the incorrect letter, you'll see how the new word fits perfectly into the context. Let's go over a few examples to explore how we might arrive at a solution. Start by thinking about common words that could be easily miswritten with an extra or incorrect letter. For instance, if we consider the word beautiful, we immediately notice that something is wrong. It's supposed to be beautiful. Here, the letter U is the incorrect letter. If we remove the U, we're left with beautiful, which is a correct word. Now consider the word receive. This is a common misspelling of receive. The incorrect letter here is the E, and if we remove it, we get the correct spelling, receive. Again, by focusing on how small letter changes affect a word's structure, we can arrive at the right solution. Another example could be te. If we remove the H, it becomes the, a perfectly valid and correct word. While this seems like a minor typographical error, it fits the pattern of how a small adjustment can correct an entire word. These examples show us how we can identify an incorrect letter and remove it to make the word correct. However, there's more to consider. Sometimes, words can have multiple letters that could potentially seem incorrect, but only one of them, when removed, will make the word both valid and meaningful. The trick is to carefully analyze the word, consider its meaning, and think about how small changes could transform it into something familiar. Now, let's consider another example. The word occurrence is a common misspelling of occurrence. Here, the incorrect letter is the extra E after the U. If we remove that letter, we're left with the correct word, occurrence. This example demonstrates how a single incorrect letter can cause confusion, but once removed, the word becomes grammatically correct and widely recognized. In some cases, the word might not look like a misspelling at first glance, but a careful analysis will reveal that removing a single letter can transform it. For example, the word separately is commonly used when people mean to write separately. The error here is the letter E after the P. Once we remove it, we get the correct spelling, separately. When thinking about how to approach this puzzle, it's helpful to remember that words often follow patterns. They're built using specific rules about spelling, and when a letter is out of place, it disrupts that pattern. By carefully observing the word and considering how the letters work together, you can usually spot the mistake. The trick is not just recognizing that something is wrong, but identifying the exact letter that, when removed, brings the word back into alignment with its correct form. One more example worth considering is the word definitely, which many people mistakenly use instead of definitely. In this case, the incorrect letter is the A. Removing it leaves us with the correct word, definitely. This is a good illustration of how a letter in the middle of the word can be the cause of the misspelling, and how removing that single letter can restore the word to its proper form. If we were to summarize the logic behind solving this puzzle, it would look like this. The task requires recognizing a word with a single letter out of place. This incorrect letter disrupts the word's meaning or spelling, but by removing it, we restore the word's correct form. The challenge is to find that one letter, which, when eliminated, makes the word valid again. So what's the word in the puzzle you were presented with? The word you're trying to solve for is likely one that fits this exact pattern. A small mistake,
an extra letter, or one that's out of place can be the key to turning a wrong word into the right one. The puzzle doesn't require you to make major changes to the word. Instead, it's about recognizing a subtle but crucial error. You might be tempted to change more than one letter or to overcomplicate the problem. But remember that the answer lies in a single, simple correction: removing one incorrect letter. By focusing on that, you can unlock the correct word and solve the puzzle. This type of puzzle not only tests your spelling and attention to detail, but also encourages you to think carefully about how small changes can lead to a significant shift in meaning. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest adjustments, like removing a single letter, are all it takes to fix a problem, whether it's a word puzzle, a mistake in a sentence, or a larger challenge in life. The key is in recognizing the exact issue, addressing it with precision, and arriving at the correct solution in a clear and straightforward manner.
You are presented with 3 bags, each labeled incorrectly. One is labeled red, one is labeled blue, and the third is labeled mixed. Each bag contains marbles, but the labels are all wrong. Your task is to figure out how to correctly label the bags by drawing just one marble from one of the bags. At first glance, this may seem tricky, but with a bit of logical thinking, the solution becomes clear. The key to solving this puzzle lies in recognizing that, because all the labels are wrong, you can use a single piece of information, just one marble, from one of the bags to set everything straight. Let's break down the puzzle step by step to understand how you can figure out the correct labels. Understanding the setup. Each of the 3 bags is labeled incorrectly. That means the bag labeled red does not only contain red marbles. It could contain either blue marbles or mixed marbles. The bag labeled blue does not only contain blue marbles. It could contain either red marbles or mixed marbles. The bag labeled mixed does not contain a mix of red and blue marbles. It must contain either only red or only blue marbles. At first, this information might seem overwhelming, but it actually helps to simplify the process. Because all labels are wrong, the key is to pick one marble from one of the bags to gather the necessary information. The result of that one marble pick will allow you to correctly label all 3 bags. The strategy. The trick is to start by picking a marble from the bag labeled mixed. The reason we begin here is that the bag labeled mixed can't actually contain a mix of red and blue marbles. It must contain only one color. Since we know that the label is wrong, it means the mixed bag contains either only red marbles or only blue marbles. Here's what happens next. If you pick a red marble from the bag labeled mixed, you now know that this bag must contain only red marbles. A label on the bag is wrong, and since it can't be mixed, it must be the red bag. If you pick a blue marble from the bag labeled mixed, you now know that this bag must contain only blue marbles. Since it can't be mixed, it must be the blue bag. Now that you've identified the true contents of the mixed bag, you can move on to the other 2 bags, assigning labels. After determining what the bag labeled mixed actually contains, it becomes easy to figure out the other 2 bags. Let's go through both possible scenarios. Scenario 1. You draw a red marble from the mixed bag. If you pull out a red marble from the bag labeled mixed, you now know that this bag actually contains only red marbles. So you've already identified the true red bag. Now you're left with 2 bags, one labeled blue and the other labeled red. Since the labels are wrong, the bag labeled blue can't contain blue marbles. Therefore, the bag labeled blue must contain the mixed marbles. That leaves the bag labeled red as the one that contains only blue marbles. Scenario 2. You draw a blue marble from the mixed bag. If you draw a blue marble from the bag labeled mixed, then this bag must contain only blue marbles. So you've identified the true blue bag. Now you're left with the 2 remaining bags, one labeled red and the other labeled blue. Since the labels are incorrect, the bag labeled red can't contain red marbles. Therefore, the bag labeled red must contain the mixed marbles.
That leaves the bag labeled blue as the one that contains only red marbles. The final result, in both cases, after drawing a single marble from the bag labeled mixed, you can correctly label all 3 bags. Here's the process. Draw 1 marble from the bag labeled mixed. If the marble is red, the bag labeled mixed contains only red marbles. The bag labeled blue contains the mixed marbles, and the bag labeled red contains only blue marbles. If the marble is blue, the bag labeled mixed contains only blue marbles. The bag labeled red contains the mixed marbles, and the bag labeled blue contains only red marbles. Once you've identified the contents of the mixed bag, the labels for the other 2 bags are easily deduced based on the process of elimination. The beauty of this puzzle lies in the simplicity of the solution. A single marble drawn from the bag labeled mixed provides all the information you need to correct the labels. This puzzle demonstrates how a small piece of information, just 1 marble, can lead to a logical solution. By carefully considering the rules of the puzzle and using the incorrect labeling to your advantage, you can work out the correct labeling for all 3 bags without needing to make multiple picks or complicated calculations. It also highlights an important concept in problem solving. Sometimes a seemingly complex issue can be resolved by focusing on a single key piece of information. In this case, the key piece was simply drawing 1 marble from the bag labeled mixed. From that 1 piece of data, you could immediately deduce the correct labels for all the bags.
Imagine a blind bartender faced with 10 red cups and 10 blue cups. These cups are arranged randomly, and the bartender has no way of distinguishing between the cups based on their color. The bartender's goal is to separate the cups into 2 groups, making sure that each group has the same number of red cups. The challenge is how to do this without being able to see the cups. At first, this seems impossible because the bartender can't visually distinguish the red cups from the blue ones. However, there's a clever solution that works using the properties of the cups and a little bit of logic. The trick is to use the concept of grouping, and the key insight is that the bartender can manipulate the cups in a way that guarantees an equal distribution of red cups in both groups, regardless of which cups are red or blue. This solution requires no visual input, only a systematic method to separate the cups. Here's how the bartender can solve this problem. Step 1. Selecting 10 cups. The first thing the bartender needs to do is to select any 10 cups from the 20 cups. Since the bartender can't see the cups, the selection is arbitrary. It doesn't matter whether the bartender picks red or blue cups, as long as they pick exactly 10 cups. This is an important step because it simplifies the problem, and no special care is needed in the selection process. Step 2. Separating the cups into 2 groups. Once the bartender has chosen 10 cups, they can form one group with these 10 cups. The other 10 cups which were not chosen automatically form the second group. Now the bartender has 2 groups of 10 cups each. Step 3. Flipping the cups in the first group. Now that the bartender has 2 groups of 10 cups, the next step is to flip every cup in the first group. This is the crucial step in the solution. The bartender doesn't need to know which cups are red or blue. By flipping every cup in the first group, the bartender ensures that the number of red cups in the first group is now equal to the number of red cups in the second group. Here's why this works. Let's assume that in the first group of 10 cups, there are X red cups. That means there are 10 minus X blue cups in that group. In the second group, there are a total of 10 cups, but since there were originally 10 red cups in total, there are 10 minus X red cups in the second group and X blue cups. When the bartender flips each cup in the first group, every red cup in the first group becomes a blue cup, and every blue cup becomes a red cup. So, the number of red cups in the first group after flipping is now 10 minus X. Since the second group already had 10 minus X red cups, the number of red cups in both groups is now the same.
Step 4. The result. After flipping the cups in the first group, the bartender has 2 groups, each containing the same number of red cups. The group that originally had X red cups now has 10 minus X red cups after the flip, and the group that originally had 10 minus X red cups has the same number of red cups. The result is that both groups now contain the same number of red cups, exactly half of the total number of red cups, which is 5. Example to clarify the process. Let's walk through a quick example to make sure everything is clear. Suppose the bartender randomly picks 10 cups from the 20 cups. In the first group of 10 cups, there are 4 red cups and 6 blue cups, just as an example. In the second group, there will be 6 red cups and 4 blue cups, since there are 10 red cups in total, and 4 are in the first group. The bartender flips every cup in the first group. Now, the 4 red cups become blue, and the 6 blue cups become red. After the flip, the first group now has 6 red cups and 4 blue cups. The second group still has 6 red cups and 4 blue cups. So both groups now have 6 red cups, which is exactly half of the total number of red cups. This method works no matter how many red or blue cups are in the first group when the bartender starts. The flipping ensures that the number of red cups in both groups is always equal, no matter the initial distribution. Why this works? The beauty of this solution lies in its simplicity. By flipping the cups in one of the groups, the bartender is using a clever strategy that guarantees an equal distribution of red cups between the 2 groups. The key insight here is that, by flipping, the bartender swaps the colors of the cups, ensuring that the number of red cups in both groups becomes balanced. This works regardless of how the cups were originally arranged, as long as the bartender picks any 10 cups and flips them. The solution doesn't require any special equipment or vision. It only requires the ability to randomly pick 10 cups and flip them. This is an example of a puzzle where a simple yet effective strategy allows for a seemingly impossible task, dividing the cups into 2 groups with an equal number of red cups to be solved with ease. In this way, the bartender can use a systematic approach where the flipping of the cups ensures that no matter how the cups are distributed, the result is always a fair split between the 2 groups. It's a great example of how logic, combined with a simple action, can solve a problem that at first seems complicated. The puzzle also highlights the power of thinking through a situation carefully and breaking it down step by step. Instead of getting caught up in the complexity of the task, the bartender approaches it with a straightforward strategy that guarantees success. By focusing on flipping the cups and understanding how the distribution of red cups changes, the bartender can easily ensure that both groups contain the same number of red cups. Imagine you are faced with a situation where you have 2 hourglasses, one that measures exactly 7 minutes and another that measures 4 minutes. Your goal is to use both hourglasses in such a way that you can measure exactly 9 minutes. At first glance, this might seem like a rather tricky challenge. After all, you can't simply rely on the time each hourglass measures on its own, and you can't stop one halfway through its cycle to adjust the timing. However, with a bit of thought, a strategic approach will reveal that you can use both hourglasses together to achieve the exact measurement of 9 minutes. To solve this puzzle, we need to understand that by flipping the hourglasses multiple times, we can manipulate the passage of time in smaller, manageable intervals. It requires us to track how my sand has fallen in each hourglass, and to carefully plan how to use these intervals to piece together exactly 9 minutes. It's all about timing and recognizing how the 2 hourglasses can interact. By making use of the fact that one hourglass will run out before the other, we can overlap the timing and ensure that we reach exactly 9 minutes. Step-by-step process for measuring 9 minutes. Let's break the solution down step by step. to clearly understand how to use the 2 hourglasses to measure exactly 9 minutes. While the puzzle may seem complicated at first, the solution becomes straightforward once we focus on each action at the right moment. Start both hourglasses at the same time. Begin by flipping both the 7-minute and the 4-minute hourglasses. This is the first step, and it sets everything in motion. At this point, both hourglasses are running down. The 7-minute hourglass will take longer to run out, but both hourglasses are equally important in helping to divide the time into useful chunks. Wait for the 4-minute hourglass to run out. The 4-minute hourglass will be the first to finish. After exactly 4 minutes, the 4-minute hourglass will run out of sand. As soon as this happens, immediately flip the 4-minute hourglass over to start it again. This is important because you're now setting up a system where one hourglass runs out and the other continues its cycle, allowing you to track different intervals. At this point, you've accounted for the first 4 minutes of the 9-minute goal. Wait for the 7-minute hourglass to run out. Now, continue observing the 7-minute hourglass. The sand will eventually run out, and once that happens, 7 minutes will have passed. At this point, the 4-minute hourglass will have already been flipped, and it has been running for 3 minutes because it was flipped over at the 4-minute mark. This is significant because once the 7-minute hourglass runs out, the 4-minute hourglass will still have 1 minute of sand left. Flip the 7-minute hourglass again. As soon as the 7-minute hourglass runs out, flip it over. The 7-minute hourglass is now starting its second cycle. Meanwhile, the 4-minute hourglass has exactly 1 minute of sand remaining. You now need to wait until the 4-minute hourglass runs out of sand. This will be the last interval you need to get to 9 minutes. Wait for the 4-minute hourglass to run out. As the 4-minute hourglass runs down to its last grain of sand, 1 more minute will have passed. At this point, 8 minutes have passed in total. This includes the 7 minutes from the first cycle of the 7-minute hourglass and the 1 minute from the 4-minute hourglass after it was flipped. Now, you are just 1 minute away from reaching the total of 9 minutes. Wait for the 7-minute hourglass to run for 1 more minute. After the 4-minute hourglass runs out, you will have exactly 1 minute left to reach 9 minutes. This is where the second cycle of the 7-minute hourglass comes in. Since it was flipped over at the 7-minute mark, it has already been running for 1 minute since its second cycle started. All you need to do now is wait for this final minute to complete. When the 7-minute hourglass completes its second cycle, exactly 9 minutes will have passed. The 7-minute hourglass will have run for the first 7 minutes, and then the additional 1 minute from its second cycle, combined with the 1 minute span left by the 4-minute hourglass, will give you the exact 9 minutes you're aiming for. Why this strategy works? The key to this solution is the careful management of the time intervals created by the 2 hourglasses. By flipping the 4-minute hourglass at the right times, the bartender uses the 4-minute hourglass to fill in gaps while the 7-minute hourglass is running its cycle. The flips ensure that the hourglasses overlap their timing in a way that results in exactly 9 minutes of total time. This method demonstrates how breaking time into manageable chunks can help solve a problem. The fact that the 4-minute hourglass runs out before the 7-minute one, combined with flipping the 7-minute hourglass as soon as it finishes its first cycle, allows the bartender to align both hourglasses in a way that tracks exactly 9 minutes. The success of this solution is built on the understanding that the 2 hourglasses can be used in parallel, with each hourglass serving a specific function at different points in the overall measurement process. By flipping the hourglasses strategically, the bartender avoids the need to wait for one hourglass to finish its cycle entirely before moving on to the next step. The power of overlapping time intervals. One of the most powerful aspects of this solution
is the way in which the hourglass's timing overlaps.
You're not simply waiting for one hourglass to finish and then starting the next cycle from scratch. Instead, the two hourglasses work together in a coordinated way. The second cycle of a 7-minute hourglass provides the final 1-minute interval needed to complete the 9-minute measurement. This is a great example of how overlapping intervals can help solve problems in a more efficient way than using a single tool or waiting for each clock to finish separately. By considering how the two hourglasses interact, the bartender is able to work with both of them simultaneously, ultimately achieving the goal of measuring exactly 9 minutes. The process also demonstrates the importance of patience and observation in problem solving. While the solution might seem complicated at first, it is ultimately about making careful decisions at each step and understanding how each action contributes to the final result. It's not about rushing to the finish line, but about timing everything correctly so that each action is aligned with the goal. Real-world application. This puzzle also serves as a good analogy for many real-world problems. In everyday life, we often face situations where multiple factors must be considered and balanced in order to achieve a specific goal. The ability to break down a problem into smaller, manageable steps and recognize how different elements can work together is an essential skill. Whether you are managing your time effectively, juggling multiple responsibilities, or handling complex tasks, this puzzle provides a useful framework for thinking about how to approach challenges in a logical, systematic way. So basically, with the right strategy, even a seemingly impossible task can be solved. The bartender's ability to manipulate the two hourglasses and use them together allows for the precise measurement of 9 minutes. By focusing on timing, observation, and logical thinking, the puzzle is solved with a straightforward method that avoids the need for guesswork or trial and error.
Imagine you're presented with a problem that involves a 2-digit number. The challenge is to figure out the original number based on a specific condition. When the digits of the number are reversed, the new number becomes 27 less than the original number. This may sound like a difficult puzzle at first, but with some logical thinking and careful breakdown of the problem, it becomes much simpler. Let's walk through the steps methodically to solve the puzzle, using a combination of algebra and reasoning to understand the relationships between the digits and ultimately arrive at the correct answer. Defining the number. The first thing we need to do is define the 2-digit number. Any 2-digit number can be expressed in terms of its digits. Let's consider a number where the tens digit is represented by the letter A and the ones digit is represented by B. So for example, if the number is 57, A would be 5, the tens digit, and B would be 7, the ones digit. Mathematically, we can express the number as original number equals 10A plus B. Original number equals 10A plus B. This formula shows us that the number consists of the tens digit A multiplied by 10 plus the ones digit B. For instance, if A is 5 and B is 7, then the original number would be original number equals 10 times 5 plus 7 equals 57. Original number equals 10 times 5 plus 7, reversing the digits. Now, let's consider what happens when we reverse the digits of the number. The ones digit B becomes the tens digit, and the tens digit A becomes the ones digit. This reversal changes the number. The new number after the digits are swapped can be expressed as reverse number equals 10B plus A. Reverse number equals 10B plus A. So if we take the example where the original number was 57, with A as 5 and B as 7, when the digits are reversed, the new number becomes reverse number equals 10 times 7 plus 5 equals 75. Reverse number equals 10 times 7 plus 5 equals 75. Understanding the problem's condition,
The puzzle tells us that when the digits of the original number are reversed, the new number becomes 27 less than the original number. In other words, the difference between the original number and the reversed number is 27. This gives us the equation original number minus reversed number equals 27. Original number minus reversed number equals 27. Now we substitute the expressions for the original number and the reversed number. The original number is 10a plus b, 10a plus b, and the reversed number is 10b plus a, 10b plus a. Substituting these into the equation, we get 10a plus b minus 10b plus a equals 27. 10a plus b minus 10b plus a equals 27. Simplifying the equation next. We simplify the equation step by step. First, distribute the subtraction over the terms. 10a plus b minus 10b minus a equals 27. 10a plus b minus 10b plus a equals 27. Now, combine like terms. We have 10a minus a, 10a minus a, which simplifies to 9a. For the b terms, we have b minus 10b, b minus 10b, which simplifies to negative 9b. The equation then becomes 9a minus 9b equals 27. 9a minus 9b equals 27. Solving for the relationship between a and b, divide the entire equation by 9. A minus b equals 3. A minus b equals 3. Now we have a much simpler equation. A minus b equals 3. A minus b equals 3. This equation tells us that the 10's digit a is 3 more than the 1's digit b. This is a crucial piece of information. Now we know that for the original number, the 10's digit exceeds the 1's digit by 3. Exploring possible values for a and b. Given that both a and b are digits, they must each be integers between 0 and 9. So we can start testing different values for a and b that satisfy the equation a minus b equals 3, a minus b equals 3. Let's list out some possibilities. If a equals 3, then b equals 0, b equals 0. If a equals 4, a equals 4, then b equals 1. If a equals 5, a equals 5, then b equals 2. If a equals 6, a equals 6, then b equals 3, b equals 3. If a equals 7, a equals 7, then b equals 4, b equals 4. If a equals 8, a equals 8, then b equals 5, b equals 5. If a equals 9, then b equals 6, b equals 6. These are all the possible pairs of digits that satisfy the equation a minus b equals 3, a minus b equals 3. Now, let's check each pair and see which one results in a valid solution to the original puzzle. Testing each pair. We can test each pair by plugging them into the original number and the reversed number and checking if the difference is 27. For a equals 3, a equals 3, and b equals 0, b equals 0, the original number is original number equals 10 times 3 plus 0 equals 30. Original number equals 10 times 3 plus 0 equals 30. The reverse number is reverse number equals 10 times 0 plus 3. Reverse number equals 10 times 0 plus 3 equals 3. The difference is 30 minus 3 equals 27. This satisfies the condition, so the original number is 30. Let's verify this solution by checking the remaining pairs. For a equals 4, a equals 4, and b equals 1. B equals 1. The original number is original number equals 10 times 4 plus 1 equals 41. Original number equals 10 times 4 plus 1 equals 41. The reverse number is reverse number equals 10 times 1 plus 4 equals 14. Reverse number equals 10 times 1 plus 4 equals 14. The difference is 41 minus 14 equals 27. 41 minus 14 equals 27. This also works. So 41 is another possible solution. For a equals 5, a equals 5, and b equals 2. The original number is original number equals 10 times 5 plus 2 equals 52. Original number equals 10 times 5 plus 2 equals 52. The reverse number is
Reverse number equals 10 times 2 plus 5 equals 25. Reverse number equals 10 times 2 plus 5 equals 25. The difference is 52 minus 25 equals 27. So 52 is another solution. There are actually multiple solutions to the problem. The original number can be 30, 41, or 52, depending on the values of a and b. All of these numbers satisfy the condition that the difference between the original number and its reverse number is exactly 27. However, in many cases, the first solution, 30, is considered the simplest or most straightforward answer, as it is the smallest possible number that meets the condition. This puzzle demonstrates the power of logical deduction and the use of algebra to solve seemingly complex problems with ease.
Picture 4 people at a narrow bridge at night.
They have one torch. Only 2 can cross at a time, and the pair must move at the slower person's speed. The 4 times are 1, 2, 5, and 10 minutes. I will call them A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 5, and D equals 10. The torch always stays with the people crossing. Someone must bring it back for the next trip. The goal is to move all 4 from the left bank to the right bank in as little total time as possible. The standard trick is to use the 2 fastest people, A and B, as shuttles. They move the torch back and forth so the slow pair can cross together. Here is the schedule that hits 17 minutes. First, A and B cross together. They take 2 minutes, the slower person's time. Now A and B stand on the right bank. C and D still wait on the left bank. The torch is on the right bank as well. Second, A brings the torch back alone. That takes 1 minute. Now A, C, and D are on the left bank. B waits on the right bank with no torch. Third, C and D cross together. They take 10 minutes because D is the slowest. Now C and D are on the right bank with B. A is the only person left behind on the left bank. The torch is on the right bank. Fourth, B brings the torch back. That takes 2 minutes. Now A and B are on the left bank together. C and D wait on the right bank. Fifth, A and B cross together again. That takes 2 minutes. Everyone is now on the right bank, and the torch is there too. Add the times. Trip 1 is 2. Trip 2 is 1. Trip 3 is 10. Trip 4 is 2. Trip 5 is 2. The total is 2 plus 1 plus 10 plus 2 equals 17 minutes. It helps to see why this plan works so well. The heavy cost is always the slow pair.
The 10-minute person and the 5-minute person are the bottleneck.
You want them to cross together once, not in 2 separate trips. If you split them, you pay the 10-minute cost once, and the 5-minute cost once anyway. But you also add extra back and forth time. Keeping them together contains the cost in one big chunk. That is why the 3rd trip above is the 10-minute block. We pay it only once. You may think we can do better by having the fastest person, A, escort each slow person. Try that plan and see what happens. A and D cross in 10. A returns in 1. A and C cross in 5. A returns in 1. A and B cross in 2. The total is 10 plus 1 plus 5 plus 1 equals 19 minutes. That looks clean, but it costs 2 extra minutes compared to 17. The gap comes from A doing 2 slow escorts. A spends time walking with D and then with C. Those 2 slow walks stack up. In the 17-minute plan, C and D walk together once for 10 minutes, and we use B to handle one of the returns. That saves time. If you try other mixes, they do not beat 17. For example, send A with D first, but then send B back, or send B with C next, and so on. Every time you deviate from the 17-minute plan, you end up either separating C and D or making an extra slow return. Both errors raise the total. The key fact is that the torch must come back twice before the last pair crosses. After C and D are both across, someone still must return with the torch so A can join B for the last crossing.
The people who can return the torch fastest are A and B. Any return done by C or D adds at least 5 minutes and blows the total. So every good plan will use only A or B for returns. The 17-minute schedule uses A for the first return and B for the second. That is as lean as it gets. There is a simple way to remember the logic. When you need to move the 2 slowest people across, you have 2 general methods. Method 1 uses A and B together as helpers. A and B cross, A returns. C and D cross, B returns. You still need the final A and B crossing. The cost of that whole block is A plus 3B plus D. Plug in the numbers. 1 plus 3 times 2 plus 10 equals 17. Method 2 uses A as a lone shuttle. A escorts D, A comes back. A escorts C, A comes back, then A and B cross. The cost of that block is 2A plus B plus C plus D. Plug in the numbers. 2 times 1 plus 2 plus 5 plus 10 equals 19. You pick the cheaper method. For these times, method 1 wins. To build more intuition, walk through the positions during the 17-minute schedule and track the torch. After the first crossing, the torch sits with A and B on the right. That allows a fast return by A. The torch goes back to the left, where C and D wait. Now, the slow pair can cross in one go, while B stands ready on the right. That puts the torch on the right again. B grabs it and heads back. Now A and B reunite on the left with the torch, so they can finish. The torch and at least one of A or B are always in the right place at the right time. No step forces a slow return, and no step splits the slow pair. Think about common mistakes. One mistake is to send A with each slow person, thinking that the fastest guide makes sense. It feels safe but wastes time in a puzzle where backtracking costs you. Another mistake is to have B cross with a slow person early, then send B back many times. That trick helps once, but if you overuse it, you get stuck doing extra 2-minute returns while still needing to pay the 10-minute and 5-minute crossings. A third mistake is to have C or D return with the torch. That is fatal because it adds at least 5 minutes at the wrong point. The returns should always be done by the fastest people.
You can test the plan with a small thought experiment. Pretend you must pay for 2 categories of time. One category is the large blocks from the slowest crossings. Those are 10 and 5. The other category is the torch returns, which must be as cheap as possible. The cheapest returns use A or B. The cheapest way to move both slow people is to lump them together once, which gives you one 10-minute block and no second 5-minute block. The cheapest way to cover the 2 returns is to let A handle one and B handle the other. The 17-minute plan does exactly that. It is the balanced plan, 1 big slow crossing and 2 fast returns. If you want a general rule you can reuse, sort the times AB times C times D. When you need to move C and D across, compare 2 patterns. Pattern 1, send A and B across, A back, C and D across, B back. Later, A and B cross to finish. Pattern 2, send A and D across, A back, A and C across, A back, then A and B cross. The total time you pay for those blocks is A plus 3B plus D for pattern 1, and 2A plus B plus C plus D for pattern 2. In many sets, pattern 1 wins when B is small compared to C. Pattern 2 can win when A is much smaller than B and C is not too big. In our case, A equals 1 and B equals 2 are both small, while C equals 5 and D equals 10 are large. Pattern 1 is better, and we get 17. You can also stress test the answer with a lower bound argument. At some point, D must cross. That costs at least 10 minutes. At some point, C must cross. That costs at least 5 minutes. You also need at least 2 returns of the torch from the right side back to the left before the last crossing completes. Why 2? Because after the very first crossing, the torch is on the right. It must come back for someone left on the left. And after the slow pair crosses, the torch ends up on the right again, while at least one person still waits on the left. so you need another return. The fastest possible pair to do those returns is A and B in 1 and 2 minutes. That means any plan will cost at least 10 plus 5 plus 1 plus 2 plus whatever extra structure it needs. If you try to squeeze below 17, you would need to shave one of those pieces, but you cannot. You cannot cut the 10 or the 5. You cannot cut both returns. You also cannot make either return faster than 1 or 2. That gives a hard floor near 18, but the 17-minute plan saves 1 minute by overlapping rolls. The last A and B crossing serves as both a needed crossing and the final step. That is why 17 is tight. Run through the 17-minute sequence once more as a clear story. 2 fast walkers, A and B, go first and light the way. A jogs back with the torch. The 2 slow walkers, C and D, now travel together and use the same light. They take the longest stretch, but only once. B, who has been waiting, brings the torch back to A. The 2 fast walkers then finish together. No one idles on the wrong side with the torch. No slow person ever walks more than once. The torch moves in a clean rhythm. Right, left, right, left, right. That rhythm wastes no step. So the shortest total time is 17 minutes, and the schedule that achieves it is A plus B cross, A back, C D cross, B back, A plus B cross. The lake doubles its lily pad coverage each day. If it is completely covered on day 48, then it must have been half covered the day before. Doubling turns 1/2 into 1 whole in a single step. So the lake is half covered on day 47, then fully covered on day 48. That is the entire idea. Work backward to see it cleanly. On day 48, the lake stands at 100% coverage. 1 day earlier, it must be at 50%, because doubling that 50% gives 100%. 1 more day back, it must be at 25%, because doubling 25% gives 50%. Keep stepping back and you get a clear sequence. 12.5% on day 45, 25% on day 46, 50% on day 47, 100% on day 48. This backward chain shows the logic with no guesswork. The growth is exponential, not linear. Exponential growth does not creep. It explodes near the end. That is why the last few days look dramatic. Many people first answer day 24 because they picture a steady climb. That would fit a linear model, like adding the same number of pads each day. But the puzzle says double, which means multiply by 2 each day. In a doubling process, the halfway point by area arrives very late. You see almost nothing for a long time, and then over a short stretch, you jump from small coverage to total coverage. A simple thought experiment can make this vivid. Imagine you see only 1% of the lake covered on day 41. That might look small and harmless, but day 42 jumps to 2%, day 43 to 4%, day 44 to 8%, day 45 to 16%, day 46 to 32%, day 47 to 64%, day 48 to 128%, which you cap at 100% since the lake cannot exceed full coverage. The moral is simple. Late stages move fast. You can make the same point with pad counts. Suppose the lake can hold 1 million pads at maximum density. On day 48, the lake holds 1 million pads. On day 47, it holds 500,000 pads. On day 46, it holds 250,000 pads. On day 45, it holds 125,000 pads. Each day back, you cut the count in half. Each day forward, you double it. The halfway day is the one whose count doubles to the full capacity the next day. That is day 47, with 500,000 pads. The numbers differ from lake to lake, but the pattern does not change. Replace 1 million with any capacity, and the halfway day still sits exactly 1 day before the full day. The same rule holds if you change the time unit. If the lily pads double every hour and the lake becomes full at 8 p.m., then it is half full at 7 o'clock p.m. If they double every week and the lake becomes full at the end of week 12, then it is half full at the end of week 11. The logic depends only on the doubling step, not on the length of the step. A short bit of jargon helps organize the idea. This is exponential growth. It follows a geometric sequence. Each step multiplies by a constant factor, here 2. When a system follows a geometric sequence, the halfway point in size occurs one multiplication step earlier than the endpoint. In this case, the growth factor equals 2, so half is the exact inverse of the next step. If the factor were 3, the same kind of backward step would give a third, not a half. So if pads tripled each day and the lake reached full coverage on day 48, then on day 47, it would be 1/3 covered, not 1/2. That detail explains why the 47th day answer depends on the doubling rule and not on anything else. You can write a simple formula to check any fraction. Treat full coverage as 1. On day 48, the coverage equals 1. Each day earlier, you divide by 2. Each day later, you multiply by 2. If you let t be the day number and ft be the fraction covered, then ft equals 2 to the power of t minus 48. On day 48, f48 equals 2 to the 0 equals 1. On day 47, f47 equals 2 to the negative 1 equals 1 over. On day 46, f46 equals 2 to the negative 2 equals 1/4. The function matches the step pattern you see by inspection. You do not need this formula to solve the riddle, but it gives a neat way to test your intuition. It also shows why many people feel surprised. The curve is flat for a long time and then shoots up. A flat line in your head pushes you to pick the midpoint in time. The correct model climbs like a staircase where each step is twice as tall as the last. So the midpoint in size is not the midpoint in time. A small story makes the shape clear. Picture a ranger who checks the lake every Sunday. On the first Sunday, she logs a thin patch near the south bank. The next week, she sees a patch that looks about twice as broad. It still seems minor. Another week passes, and it looks wider again, but the water still seems open. After several more Sundays, she feels concern, because the green mat has reached the center. By the second to last Sunday, the lake looks half covered. The Sunday after that, she returns to a carpet of pads from bank to bank. Her notes would show a slow change for many weeks, and then a sudden jump right at the end. That is the core danger with exponential growth. It hides until it does not. Think about control and planning through the same lens. If you want to keep the lake healthy, you do not wait until day 47 to act. At that point, you have half a lake left, and only one day before the whole surface is choked. Removal work done early is cheap, because each bag of pads you pull out removes 1 bag today and 2 bags tomorrow and 4 the day after. Early action denies the growth machine its compounding. By day 47, the same amount of work barely dents the surface. This is why people use the term carrying capacity. The lake can carry only so many pads. A doubling process races to that limit and then stops only because it runs out of room. You can also flip the question and ask when the lake was a quarter full or an eighth full. The same backward rule answers that at once. A quarter full appears on day 46. An eighth full appears on day 45. A 16th full appears on day 44. If you like percentages, that is 25%, 12.5%, and 6.25% on those days. Each step back halves the share. Each step forward doubles the share. If you want to predict the day for a specific fraction p, you can use the relation 2 to the power of t equals p. Solving for t gives t equals 48 plus log 2. For p equals 0.5, log 2.5 equals -1, so t equals 47. For p equals 0.25, log 2.25 equals -2, so t equals 46. For p equals 0.75, log 2.75 is a negative fraction,
so the answer falls between day 47 and day 48. In the puzzle, we use whole days, so we round as the setup allows. The main point remains.
Any fraction that is a power of 1/2 lands an integer number of days before the end.
A lot of real systems behave like this in early phases. Yeast in a vat can double each cycle. Certain invasive plants spread in similar fashion when nothing holds them back. Populations of bacteria in a dish do the same until they hit limits on food or space. The curve looks gentle and then sudden. The same math explains all of those cases. The lake puzzle offers a clean, safe way to build intuition for that shape. When someone asks, when was it half full, your mind should jump to one doubling step earlier than full. It can help to think about the start of the process too. You might wonder how many pads covered the lake on day 1. The puzzle never says. It does not need to. You could start with 1 pad. You could start with 10 pads. You could start with a tiny patch hardly worth a count. As long as the growth rule holds and nothing blocks it, the chain of doublings will still land exactly half coverage, 1 step before full coverage. If you do like concrete numbers, start with a single pad. Each day the count doubles. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. After k days, you have 2 to the power of k pads. If the lake holds 2 to the 47 pads at half capacity and 2 to the 48 pads at full capacity, then the switch from day 47 to day 48 is the jump from 2 to the 47 to 2 to the 48. The labels half and full line up exactly with that doubling. You can also test the answer against a simple sanity check. Suppose the lake was half covered on some day earlier than day 47, say day 46. Then doubling on day 47 would make it full, and doubling on day 48 would try to exceed full. The puzzle states that the lake reaches full coverage on day 48, not on day 47. That rules out day 46 or any earlier day as the halfway mark. Suppose instead that the lake was half covered later than day 47, say day 48. That would mean the last doubling would push it from half to full only after day 48, which contradicts the setup. Only day 47 fits both the doubling rule and the stated endpoint. People often remember this puzzle by a sure rule of thumb. For any process that doubles each period and hits a hard limit on period n, the system reached half the limit on period n-1, quarter on n-2, eighth on n-3. You can recite that as a small cadence. Half 1 step before, quarter 2 steps before, eighth 3 steps before. In symbols, with n equals 48, half coverage is on 47, quarter on 46, and so on. This rule of thumb stores the behavior of geometric progressions in a few words. You now have 2 ways to see it. The first way is the plain verbal version. Doubling means the last step takes you from half to full, so the day before full is half. The second way is the numeric or algebraic version. Coverage equals 2 to the power of t minus 48. So at t equals 47, the value is 1/2. Both paths point to the same day. Both paths rely only on the core rule that defines the puzzle. Either way, the lake is half covered on day 47.
If you know the coin is fair and each flip is independent, the chance the next flip is heads is 1/2. 10 heads in a row does not change that. A fair coin has no memory. It does not try to balance past results. It does not feel that tails are due. Independence means the next flip ignores the last 10. You could have 10 heads or 10 tails or a zigzag mix, and the next flip still lands heads with probability 1 out of 2. That answer solves the classic version of the puzzle. Many logic quizzes expect it. The catch is in the word no. In real life, you rarely know the coin is fair. You hold a small metal disc you picked up at a party. You flip it 10 times and see heads every time. Now you face a choice. Treat those 10 heads as noise from a fair process, or treat them as evidence that the coin is biased or even gaffed.
If you keep the fair coin assumption, you say 50-50 for the next flip. If you drop that assumption and use the 10 heads as data, your estimate should rise above 1/2. How far it rises depends on how surprised you were to see a bias before you started flipping. It helps to draw a bright line between two questions. First, what is the chance of heads on the next flip given a known fair coin and independent flips? The answer is 50%. Second, what is the chance of heads on the next flip when you are not sure about the coin's bias and you update your belief using the 10 heads you just saw? Now the answer is greater than 50%, and you can compute it with a simple model. Before we build that model, clear away a common error. 10 heads in a row does not make tails do. That belief is the gambler's fallacy. It feels right because we expect long runs to be rare in a short window. Yet long runs happen all the time in longer play. The chance of 10 heads in a row from a fair coin is 1 divided by 2 to the 10th. The number 2 to the 10th equals 1024 because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 multiplies to 1024. So 1 over 2/10 equals 1 over 1024, which is about 0.009766. That looks small, but it is not impossible. If you flip a fair coin many times, you will see runs. If a stadium full of people each flip a coin 10 times, someone will see 10 heads. That event does not prove their coin is tricked. It also does not make their next flip lean to tails. The fair coin model still says 50-50 for the next flip. Now, switch to the real-world stance. You found the coin in a drawer. You do not know if it is fair. You flip it 10 times and see 10 heads. You should update. A natural way to update uses a Bayesian model. In plain terms, you start with a prior belief about how biased coins are in general. You look at the data, 10 heads, and you combine them to form a posterior belief. Then you compute the chance the next flip is heads under that posterior. The math for coins is tidy if you use a beta distribution for the unknown head rate, which is the chance of heads on one flip. You do not need to memorize the details. You only need one rule. After you see H heads and T tails, the predicted chance of heads on the next flip equals A plus H divided by A plus B plus H plus T, where A and B are the two numbers that define your prior. Bigger A means you started out leaning to heads. Bigger B means you started out leaning to tails. If you want a neutral starting point, use A equals 1 and B equals 1. That is a uniform prior. It says before you saw any flips, you treated all head rates between 0 and 1 as equally plausible. After 10 heads and 0 tails, your prediction for the next flip becomes 1 plus 10 divided by 1 plus 1 plus 10. Add the top numbers. 1 plus 10 equals 11. Add the bottom numbers. 1 plus 1 plus 10 equals 12. So the predicted chance is 11 over 12. As a decimal, 11 divided by 12 equals 0.91666, with 6 repeating. That is about 91.67%. You moved far above 50% because 10 heads in a row is strong evidence for a head-leaning coin. If you began with a wide-open mind, some people prefer a prior that gives less weight to extreme biases until data forces the issue. A common choice is the Jeffreys prior, which uses A equals 0.5 and B equals 0.5. Do the same update. After 10 heads and 0 tails, the prediction for the next flip is 0.5 plus 10 divided by 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 10. Add the top numbers. 0.5 plus 10 equals 10.5. Add the bottom numbers. 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 10 equals 11. So the chance is 10.5 over 11. As a decimal, 10.5 divided by 11 equals 0.95454, with 45 repeating. That is about 95.45%. This prior starts out more cautious, yet 10 heads still push the next flip estimate very high. You can also use a simple two-coin story. Picture a jar with two types of coins: a fair coin that lands heads with chance 1/2, and a trick coin with heads on both sides, which lands heads with chance 1. Before any flips, you think there is a 99% chance you drew a fair coin and a 1% chance you drew the trick coin. You flip the coin 10 times and see 10 heads. What should you think now? Use Bayes' rule in words. Ask which story better explains the data. The trick coin has probability 1 of producing 10 heads. The fair coin has probability 1/2 to the power of 10, which equals 1/1024. Weight those by the prior chances and then renormalize. Carry out the numbers step by step. Multiply the prior for the trick coin by the likelihood of 10 heads under that coin. 0.01 times 1 equals 0.01. Multiply the prior for the fair coin by the likelihood under the fair coin. 0.99 times 1/1024. The fraction 1/1024 equals about 0.00009765625. Multiply 0.99 by 0.00009765625 to get 0.0000096796875. Add the two weighted terms to form the total evidence. 0.01 plus 0.000000966796875 equals 0.010966796875. Divide the trick term by this total to get the posterior chance that the coin is the trick coin. 0.01 divided by 0.010966796875 is approximately 0.91184327769, which is about 91.18%. The fair coin's posterior is the remainder. 1 minus 0.91184327769 is approximately 0.0881567231, or about 8.82%. Now compute the predictive chance of heads on the next flip. If the coin is trick, the next flip is heads with chance 1. If the coin is fair, the next flip is heads with chance 1/2. Weight by the posteriors: 0.91184327769 times 1 plus 0.0881567231 times 0.5. Half of 0.0881567231 is 0.0440783615. Add that to 0.91184327769 to get 0.9592163845. As a percentage, that is about 95.59%. With only a 1% prior on the coin being gaffed, the data swing you hard toward the gaffed story after 10 heads. These three examples tell one story. If you lock in the fair coin model, the next flip is heads with chance 50%. If you allow the coin to be biased and you update using the 10 heads, the next flip is heads with chance greater than 50%. How much greater depends on how strong your prior skepticism is. A flat prior gives about 91.67%. A Jeffries prior gives about 95.45%. A two-coin prior with only a 1% chance of a double-headed coin gives about 95.59%. None of these numbers claim to be the truth. They show a range that comes from your starting beliefs and the same data. So which answer should you give? If the puzzle sits in a probability class where the model says, assume a fair coin and independence, say 1/2, and explain that past flips do not change the next flip. If the puzzle sits in a decision context, say you must bet your own money after watching those 10 heads, then say what model you believe and own it. If you think coins can be biased or tricked,
and you have no strong reason to trust this coin, you should place the next flip chance well above 1/2. Because the run you just watched is strong evidence. You can even speak without formulas. 10 heads in a row is much more consistent with a head-leaning coin than with a fair coin. It does not prove bias, but it pushes you to suspect it. It also helps to think about the limits. If you saw only one head, you should barely move from 1/2. If you saw 2 or 3 heads, you might still call it noise. As the run grows, your estimate should climb. If you saw 50 heads, you would be almost sure the coin is a 2-headed coin or a near lock for heads. The fair coin story would be possible but very hard to accept, because 1/2 to the power of 50 is tiny. That number equals 1 divided by 1, 125,899,906,842,624. You would not treat that as luck in any practical setting. The 10-head case sits far from that, but it points in the same direction. A short scenario may help anchor this in action. You sit at a table and watch a stranger flip a coin. You see heads 10 times. The stranger offers you a bet at even money on the next flip. If you believe the fair coin model, you see no edge. If you allow for bias and you update from the data, you should feel that heads now has the edge. You accept a bet on heads. Your stake size then reflects how sure you feel. If the coin turns out to be fair, your edge vanishes, but your choice was still sound given what you knew. Good decisions weigh the model and the data, not hindsight. One last point rounds out the picture. People sometimes argue that chance is still 1/2 because you cannot prove bias from 10 flips. That mixes up proof with prediction. You do not need proof to adjust odds. You need a model and data. 10 flips is not proof of anything, yet it is evidence. A fair model throws off such a run with low probability. A biased model throws it off with higher probability. The better a model explains the data you saw, the more weight you should give it when you forecast the next step. That is the spirit of Bayesian updating and also the spirit of everyday judgment. Use past observations in proportion to how surprising they are under each live hypothesis. After 10 heads, a coin that favors heads is no longer a fringe idea. It is the leading one. So the short answer depends on the frame. Known fair coin with independent flips, 50%. Unknown coin and rational updating from 10 heads, greater than 50%, often well above 90% under reasonable starting beliefs. The data you saw guide you to those higher numbers. The stronger your prior trust in fair, the closer you stay to 1/2. The weaker your prior trust, the closer you move to the head-leaning side.
Pick one fruit from the box, labeled mixed. That box cannot be mixed because every label is wrong. So it must hold only apples or only oranges. The single fruit you draw tells you which one it is. If you pull out an apple, that whole box is apples. If you pull out an orange, that whole box is oranges. With that one fact in hand, you can fix the other 2 labels by elimination. If the mixed label turns out to be apples, then the box labeled oranges cannot be oranges and cannot be apples either, so it must be the mixed box. The remaining box labeled apples then has to be oranges. If the mixed label turns out to be oranges, you swap the roles. The box labeled apples becomes mixed, and the box labeled oranges becomes apples. One draw settles it. Walk through a concrete scenario so you can see each step. Imagine 3 closed boxes on a counter. A sticker on the first says apples, the second says oranges, and the third says mixed. You know the stickers are all wrong. That means the apple sticker does not sit on a box of apples, the oranges sticker does not sit on a box of oranges, and the mixed sticker does not sit on a mixed box. You reach into the box marked mixed and pull a single fruit. Suppose it is an apple. Then the mixed label sits on a box that contains only apples. You peel that wrong label off and replace it with apples. Because now you know the truth of that box. You look at the remaining two. The box that used to say oranges cannot be oranges, and it cannot be apples either, because you already used apples on the first box. It must be mixed. You relabel it mixed. The last box, which used to say apples, cannot be apples and cannot be mixed, so it must be oranges. Every label now matches the contents. If your first draw from the mixed label had been an orange instead, a logic would run the same way with the names flipped. The reason this works is simple and worth stating plainly. The mixed label gives you the cleanest information because that box is guaranteed not to be mixed. It must be a single fruit box. One draw, therefore, tells you the entire identity of that box with no ambiguity. If you try to draw from one of the other labels first, you can get stuck. Say you draw from the box labeled apples. That label is wrong. The box is either oranges only or mixed. If you happen to pull an orange, you still do not know which it is, because both a mixed box and an oranges only box can give you an orange on a single draw. You could draw an orange from a mixed box by chance on the first try. You would need more draws to tell them apart. The puzzle gives you one draw, so you cannot afford that ambiguity. The mixed label avoids it. You can also frame the same idea as a small process of elimination, using the fact that all three labels are wrong. There are only two ways to mislabel three distinct boxes so that all labels are wrong. List the true contents in order as apples only, oranges only, mixed. Place the wrong stickers in front of them in a way that no sticker matches its box. One pattern has apples stuck on the oranges only box, oranges stuck on the mixed box, and mixed stuck on the apples only box. The other pattern has apples stuck on the mixed box, oranges stuck on the apples only box, and mixed stuck on the oranges only box. Those are the only possibilities that keep every sticker wrong. When you draw from the mixed label box, you learn whether that box is apples only or oranges only, and that single fact tells you which of the two patterns you had. If the mixed label sits on apples only, you are in the first pattern. If it sits on oranges only, you are in the second. Once you know the pattern, you can relabel the other two without touching them. It helps to test the method against edge cases so you trust it. Suppose you ignored the advice and drew from the box labeled apples. If you pull out an apple, you get lucky, because now you know that box must be mixed. An all apples box is impossible under a wrong apples label. With that lucky draw, you can finish the labeling in the same way as before. But if you pull out an orange, your position is worse. The box could be oranges only or mixed, and a single orange does not distinguish them. You would need a second draw from that same box to see whether an apple ever shows up. The puzzle forbids that extra draw. The method that starts with the mixed label removes that risk. It guarantees that the single fruit you see pins down a single fruit box. This is also a nice example of how to wring the most information out of one sample. You want to pick from a box that cannot produce the same observation under two different hypotheses. The mixed label box has only two possible identities, apples only or oranges only. A single apple rules out oranges only. A single orange rules out apples only. Either way, you lock in the identity. The apples label box, in contrast, has two possible identities, mixed or oranges only. But both identities can produce an orange on the first draw. You can get the same observation from two different true states, which makes the observation weak. You never want a test that leaves you in the same spot you started. Keep the labels and contents fresh in your head with a second walkthrough, this time assuming the first draw from the mixed label is an orange. You reach in, feel a round fruit, and see orange skin. You declare that whole box oranges only.
because the label cannot be mixed. Now the box that used to say apples cannot be apples and cannot be oranges, because you have already placed the oranges only label elsewhere. It must be the mixed box. You relabel it mixed. The last box, which used to say oranges, cannot be oranges and cannot be mixed, so it must be apples only. Without opening the last two, you finish the job. You never draw from them because you do not need to.
You can check that no other single draw plan can beat this in clarity. If you draw from the oranges label first, you run into the twin of the earlier problem. That box is either apples only or mixed. If you pull out an apple, you still do not know which it is, because both a mixed box and an apples only box can yield an apple on one draw. If you pull out an orange, you get lucky and can finish, but the risk of an ambiguous outcome is still there. The mixed label pick is the only one that avoids a dead end regardless of which fruit you happen to grab. It is worth spelling out why the all labels wrong condition is so strong. Without it, one draw would not be enough. If you only knew that at least one label was wrong, then drawing an apple from the mixed label box would not tell you whether that box was apples only or mixed, because the mixed label could be right in that weaker setup. The guarantee that every label is wrong collapses the space of possibilities down to two neat cases, and one sample separates them. You can dress this up in a shop floor story to see how you would use it in practice. A grocer has 3 sealed crates from a supplier after a labeling error. Each crate holds either only apples, only oranges, or a mix. The supplier admits that the labels are all wrong, but the truck is about to leave. The grocer wants to fix every label but also wants to minimize handling. She reaches into the crate marked mixed, pulls one fruit and looks. If she sees an apple, she writes apples on that crate, marks the crate previously labeled oranges as mixed, and marks the crate previously labeled apples as oranges. If she sees an orange instead, she flips the assignments in the obvious way. She updates her inventory sheet and sends the truck on time. She had no need to open every crate. She used the one observation that could not mislead her. You can even view this as a tiny lesson in experiments. Before you collect data, list the live possibilities, then choose an observation that will split them apart. The right pick is not a random poke. It is a test designed to force a decisive outcome. Here, the key is to sample the one label that is guaranteed to be attached to a single fruit box. That makes the single fruit you pull a complete signal, not a hint. The next step uses constraint logic. Once you tag one box, the others fall into place because the original all wrong rule leaves no wiggle room. Apples only and oranges only are each used once, and the mixed label goes on what remains. If you like a light touch of notation, we can call the true contents A, O, and M, and the current wrong labels A, O, and M. There are exactly 2 derangements that send labels to wrong boxes: M to A, O to M, A to O, or M to O, A to M, O to A. Drawing from the box with label M tells you whether N to A or M to O. The rest follows. You do not need to write that down to solve the puzzle on a napkin, but it shows that the structure is tight. One bit flips the coin between 2 cases. Some common missteps recur. People try to grab from the apples label first and think they can always finish, but they forget the orange from mixed ambiguity. People also try to relabel 2 boxes at once without checking consequences, and they end up giving the third box the same label as one of the first 2, which cannot be right. The safe way is to nail one identity with a decisive draw and then assign the rest by ruling out the impossible. You can verify your final labels by a quick consistency check. If you drew an apple from mixed, you should end with boxes labeled apples, mixed, oranges in some order, with each label now matching contents. Open a corner of each box and peek at a few fruits. The apples only box will show only apples. The oranges only box will show only oranges. The mixed box will show both on the surface. Your one draw should never create a contradiction. If you ever find a conflict, it means you skipped the constraint that all original labels were wrong, or you drew from the wrong box first.
The neat part of this puzzle is how little you have to do. One fruit, one look, one certainty.
It models a clean approach to problem solving.
Use the strongest given condition to reduce the space to a few cases.
Take an observation that cannot be faked by more than one case, then finish by deduction. Here, the strongest condition is that all labels are wrong. The best observation is from the mixed label, which cannot be mixed. The deduction is just basic elimination. With that plan, the boxes almost label themselves once you start.